Welcome back. This is a continuation of the Star Trek campaign, though you may find that it is becoming more of a story and less of a D6 RPG. I hope you enjoy the story and the direction that we are going. Space: The Final Frontier. These are the voyages. Season 5, The Spear's Tip. Location: Hangar Bay 1, Freedom-class destroyer. You can name the ship, or we can use the USS Liberty for now. Time: 3 months after the destruction of New Halcyon. The hangar deck of a Freedom-class destroyer was never meant to hold a permanent fighter wing. The ceiling is low, the deck space is non-existent, and the air constantly smells of high-yield plasma coolant and sweat. 8 Valkyrie-class tactical flyers are clamped tightly into their magnetic launch racks. Unlike the old, blocky Peregrines, the Valkyries look like arrowheads, sleek, predatory, and built entirely around their massive forward pulse cannons. Standing at attention in front of the fighters are the 4 replacements. They look nervous, clutching their flight helmets. Pacing in front of them is Lieutenant Commander Valak. Valak is a Vulcan, but the war has stripped away the pristine, peaceful aura usually associated with his people. His Starfleet uniform is immaculate, but his eyes carry the cold, calculating weight of a man who has watched too many people die. Behind Valak stand the surviving veterans of Gold Flight, leaning against the hull of Gold 1. Mrak. Gold 2. The Kytion female's tail twitches rhythmically. She is sharpening a combat knife against a piece of duranium scrap, her golden eyes locked unblinking on the new recruits. Lieutenant Anna Shvetsov. Gold 3. The human pilot has her arms crossed, chewing on a piece of gum. She looks at the replacements with a gaze so icy it could freeze a warp core. Dan O'Keefe. Gold 4. He looks like the only approachable one, offering a tight, sympathetic smile to the terrified Nuggets. You are the replacements, Valak says, his voice flat, carrying no malice, only Vulcan precision. You have been assigned to Gold Flight because the previous occupants of your flight suits were mathematically outmaneuvered by the Hive. Your purpose is to ensure that statistical anomaly is not repeated. Valak stops pacing and looks at the 4 of them. Mottel, Valak says. The blue-skinned Balian snaps to attention. Your file indicates you grew up on a moisture farm. You are accustomed to repairing vital machinery with substandard parts in harsh conditions. That will serve you well here. He turns to the Orion. Jeklo. Your father mined dilithium on a rogue asteroid. You have flown ore haulers through high-density gravity wells since you were a child. You understand the physics of mass and momentum. Valak moves down the line to the human male. Robert Saul. Your father assembled EPS conduits in the Utopia Planitia factories. You know how these ships are built. I expect you to know exactly how much structural stress a Valkyrie can endure before it shatters. Finally, Valak stops in front of the last human female, Mel Stufel. Valak's eyebrow raises a fraction of a millimeter. Your Starfleet record prior to the Flight Academy is heavily redacted by Starfleet intelligence. Fascinating. I do not require your history, Ensign. I require your trigger discipline. Valak turns back to face the entire group. The Freedom class operates alone. We do not have a fleet behind us. If we are engaged, Gold Flight is the only line of defense between this ship and destruction. You will be assigned a veteran flight leader. You will follow their telemetry, you will obey their orders, and you will not die. Is that understood? Sir. Yes, sir, the 4 replacements shout. The assignments. Valak looks over at his veterans. To survive, these replacements need to be paired with the right mentors. Valak stops pacing. The 4 replacement ensigns stand rigidly at attention. Behind them, the massive, arrowhead-shaped hulls of the 4 Valkyrie-class tactical flyers sit clamped to the deck. They are much larger than the old Peregrines, heavy gunships built for deep space endurance. The Valkyrie is not a fighter, Valak says, his Vulcan baritone cutting through the hum of the hangar bay. It is a heavy tactical flyer. It requires a pilot and a co-pilot working in perfect, unbroken synchronization. You will eat, sleep, and fight inside that hull. There is enough cubic volume to fit 8 humanoids if you utilize the sleep pods and the cargo netting, but it is designed as a home for 2. He looks at the 4 veterans, then back to the rookies. The USS Liberty is a destroyer, not a carrier. It does not have the resources to house you long-term. This hangar is a pit stop. You land, you rearm, you refuel, and you launch. Your ship is your world now. Valak picks up a PADD. Here are your assignments. The pairings. Gold 3. Valak calls out. Lieutenant Anna Shvetsov steps forward, her jaw set, popping a bubble of gum. Shvetsov, Valak says. You will take Ensign Jeklo. Jeklo, the broad-shouldered Orion, steps up. He looks like a brawler, used to muscling ore haulers through asteroid fields. Anna looks him up and down, her icy blue eyes unimpressed. Try not to break the tactical console with those meat hooks, Greenhorn, Anna says dryly. Jeklo grunts. Just point the nose at the target, Lieutenant. I'll handle the guns. Gold 2. The Kaition Mrak pushes off the hull of her ship, her tail lashing side to side. She shows her fangs in what might be a smile. Mrak, you will take Ensign Mottel, Valak orders. The blue-skinned Balian farm boy swallows hard as the feline predator circles him, sniffing the air. You smell like dirt and fear. Mrak purrs, her golden eyes glinting. Good. Fear keeps you awake. Welcome to the hunt, farmer. Gold 4. Dan O'Keefe gives a friendly, easygoing salute. O'Keefe, you will take Ensign Mel Stufel. Mel steps forward. She moves without making a sound, her posture rigid, her eyes completely unreadable. Hey there, Mel, Dan says, offering a warm smile. Don't worry, I'm the easy one to get along with. You handle the sensor sweeps, I'll handle the flying, and we'll be fine. Mel simply nods once. Acknowledged, Lieutenant. She doesn't offer a handshake. Dan's smile falters slightly. Gold 1. Valak lowers the PADD, which leaves Ensign Robert Saul. You are with me. Saul, the blue-collar Utopia Planitia kid, wipes grease off his hands onto his pants. I know these engines inside and out, Commander. If she takes a hit, I can patch the plasma relays blindfolded. I require a co-pilot, Ensign, not a mechanic, Valak replies smoothly. Though your practical knowledge of EPS tolerances will be mathematically useful when we push the engines past Starfleet safety protocols. Come. It is time to see your quarters. Inside the Valkyrie. Location. Interior, Gold 1. Valak leads Robert Saul up the primary boarding ramp located under the belly of the Valkyrie. The interior is a masterpiece of cramped, utilitarian design. Directly at the top of the ramp is a tiny, multi-purpose space. On the port wall is a micro-replicator and a fold-out table barely large enough for 2 trays. On the starboard wall is a cramped sonic shower and head. Aft, built directly into the bulkheads over the throbbing impulse engines, are 2 enclosed sleep pods. Forward of the living space is the cockpit. It features 2 heavy shock seats positioned side by side. The pilot, left, has the flight yoke and navigational deflectors. The co-pilot, right, controls the massive forward pulse cannons, tactical sensors, and the micro-torpedo launchers. Stow your gear in the lower pod, Valak instructs, gracefully sliding into the left seat and beginning his pre-flight checks. His hands move over the console with blinding, practice speed. Saul tosses his duffel bag into the sleep pod and drops into the right seat. He looks at the staggering array of tactical displays. It's a lot of firepower for one console, Saul mutters, running a hand over the edge of the panel. He notices the edge is slightly worn down, the paint chipped. It is, Valak agrees, his eyes fixed on his own monitors. If we engage a hive swarm, my focus will be entirely on spatial geometry and evasion. I will not have the cognitive bandwidth to tell you when to fire. You must anticipate the target locks. We must function as a single neurological unit. Saul nods, the reality of the war settling heavily on his shoulders. I've got your back, Commander. Logic dictates that you must, Ensign. Otherwise, we will both perish. The first launch. Suddenly, the overhead comms inside the Valkyrie crackle to life. It's the Liberty's flight deck control. Gold Flight, this is Liberty Actual. We have a priority alert. Long-range sensors have detected a hive convoy moving through the Tenebrous sector. They are carrying raw bioresin to a forward staging ground. We need that convoy vaporized. Valak's hand hovers over the main power conduit. Gold 1, systems nominal, Valak says calmly. In the ships next to them, the rest of the flight checks in. Gold 2, the claws are sharp, Mrak hisses. Gold 3, weapons hot, Anna Shvetsov reports, followed by Jeklo's deep grunt of confirmation. Gold 4, we're green and ready to go, O'Keefe says. Copy that, Gold Flight, Liberty Actual replies. Magnetic locks disengaging.
Clear the deck.
Good hunting. The deck drops away. Valak punches the thrusters. The Valkyrie shoots out of the USS Liberty's open hangar bay, hurtling into the cold vacuum of space, followed instantly by Gold 2, 3, and 4. The Liberty instantly banks away, its massive single nacelle glowing bright as it prepares to jump to warp and continue its patrol, leaving the 4 heavy flyers alone in the dark. Ensign Sol, Valak says, his eyes locked on the stars ahead. Arm the forward cannons. Let us see what Utopia Planitia has taught you. The long haul. Location, the Tenebris sector, deep space transit, time, 14 hours since launch from the USS Liberty. The Tenebris sector is vast, empty, and boring. The Hive convoy is still days away at maximum cruising speed. The Valkyries are flying in a loose diamond formation on autopilot. Inside the heavy tactical flyers, the adrenaline of the launch has completely worn off. Now, it's just the hum of the impulse engines, the recycled air, and the realization that there is nowhere to hide from your co-pilot. Gold 3, the ice and the anvil. In Gold 3, the silence is deafening. Jeklo, the massive Orion, barely fits in the right-hand shock seat. He has spent the last 3 hours meticulously field stripping and reassembling a Starfleet tissue phaser pistol on his lap, his thick green fingers surprisingly deft. Lieutenant Anna Shvetsov hasn't said a word since they cleared the Liberty's wake. She is reading a tactical manual on her console, occasionally blowing a bubble with her gum that pops with a sharp crack. You're making my sensors twitch with that, Anna finally says, not looking up from her screen. With what, Lieutenant? Jeklo rumbles. The phaser. Put it away. We're flying through empty space. Unless you plan on shooting the console, you don't need it. Jeklo slides the power cell home with a loud clack. My father always said a quiet sector is just an ambush holding its breath. But you're the boss. Gold 2. The Predator and the Prey. In Gold 2, Mottel is sweating. The Blueskin Balian is trying to run a Level 3 diagnostic on the microtorpedo targeting scanners, but he can feel eyes on him. Mrak isn't in her pilot seat. The Kytion has engaged the autopilot and is currently lounging in the cargo netting strung up in the tiny aft-living space, just behind Mottel's head. She is watching him work, her tail swaying lazily. Your heart rate is elevated, Ensign. Mrak purrs, her voice right next to his ear. Mottel jumps, nearly dropping his PADD. Just making sure the EPS flow is optimal, Lieutenant. Lots of ghost readings in this sector. Mrak chuckles, a low, rumbling sound. You check the sensors. I will smell them if they get close. Gold 1. The Odd Couple. Ensign Robert Saul is already elbow-deep in an access panel beneath his console. Commander, the starboard thruster manifold is running about 3% hotter than port. It's not a safety issue, but it's going to burn through our deuterium reserves slightly faster over a 2-week patrol. Valak doesn't take his eyes off the forward viewport. Can you mathematically correct the imbalance without taking the manifold offline? Yeah, just need to reroute the coolant flow through the secondary buffer. Give me 10 minutes. Proceed. Your proactive maintenance is logical, Ensign. Saul grins from under the console. Just treating her like she's mine, Commander. Gold 4. The Elephant in the Room. In Gold 4, the tension is of a completely different nature. Dan O'Keefe is trying his best. He's a naturally gregarious guy who builds rapport to establish trust in the cockpit. But his co-pilot is a brick wall. Mel Stu-Full sits rigidly in the right seat. She is wearing the retro-style Starfleet miniskirt uniform variant, her posture perfectly straight. She is running continuous, unnecessary long-range sensor sweeps just to keep her eyes on the screen and away from Dan. Beneath her calm exterior, she is miserable. The Deltan physiology runs hot, a constant, buzzing energy under her skin, but her mind, the mind of the human male she used to be before the transporter accident, feels entirely alien in this body. The cramped cockpit feels suffocating. So, Dan says, breaking the 2-hour silence, leaning back in his seat and stretching his arms. We've got a lot of black space between us and that hive convoy. You ever been out this far into the Tenebrous sector, Mel? No, sir, Mel replies flatly, her eyes locked on the sensor readouts. You can drop the sir when it's just us in the can. Dan smiles gently. Dan is fine. O'Keefe. Whatever works. I saw your pilot scores from the academy. You fly a hell of an atmospheric entry. Where did you learn to handle sheer winds like that? Mel's hands tighten slightly on the edge of the console. The memories of learning to fly are from his childhood, flying a rigged-up hopper in the canyons of Earth with his dad. Sharing that feels like a lie in this body, but telling the truth is out of the question. Simulators, Mel says curtly. Dan sighs internally, turning his chair slightly toward her. He notices she looks incredibly uncomfortable, shifting in her seat, tugging slightly at the hem of the uniform skirt. Hey, Dan says, his tone shifting from casual to genuine concern. Are you doing all right? If you need to rack out, the sleep pod is open. Or, if the life support is running too hot, I can drop the ambient temp. You seem a little flushed. It's an innocent question, but to Mel, carrying the hypersensitive Deltan pheromones and the deep embarrassment of her physical reality, it feels like a spotlight. Gemini said, I'm going to take the aft pod for an hour, Lieutenant, Mel says suddenly, her voice tight. Before Dan can say another word, she unbuckles her harness, steps out of the right seat, and moves into the cramped living space just behind the cockpit. She slides into the lower sleep pod and pulls the privacy screen shut with a sharp clack. Dan sits in the pilot's seat for a long moment, staring out at the streaking stars of the Tenebrous sector. The silence in the Valkyrie is heavy. All right, Dan mutters to himself. Something's wrong. You don't freeze up like that over a question about flight simulators. He's not trying to be a jerk, but they are heading into a combat zone against a hive convoy. He needs to know if his co-pilot is carrying trauma that's going to make her freeze when the disruptor fire starts. Dan reroutes his tactical display, pulling up the Starfleet internal personnel database. He enters his flight leader command override codes. The dice roll, Dan, computer ops/investigation. Skill, for D. Difficulty, moderate, 15. Bypassing basic medical privacy locks with a command code. Roll, 4, 5, 6, 2-17 success. The revelation. The screen blinks from tactical green to classified red. Dan begins to read. As he scrolls through the heavily redacted Starfleet medical reports, his eyes widen. Incident report, USS Tsiolkovsky. Cause, pattern buffer cascade failure. Subjects, Ensign Mark Stoffel, human, male, and Lieutenant Laya, Deltan, female. Result, complete cellular and neural fusion. Symbiotic integration permanent. Separation mathematically impossible without fatal neural degradation. Dan reads the psychological profile. The resulting officer, now designated Mel Stoffel, retained the human male's core consciousness, memories, and upbringing, but was permanently housed within the physiological body of the female Deltan. The file notes the severe dysphoria, a man's mind navigating a female body, complicated by the intense, aggressive pheromonal biology and high libido of the Deltan species. Dan slowly exhales, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. The stiffness. The discomfort in the miniskirt uniform variant she was likely mandated to wear due to Deltan thermal regulation needs. The way she avoided looking at the other women in the flight wing. She wasn't just hiding a secret, she was trapped in a daily, waking nightmare of identity. He is so absorbed in the file that he doesn't hear the privacy screen slide open. What the hell are you doing? Dan flinches, instantly slapping his console to clear the screen, but he's too late. Mel is standing directly behind his chair. Her face is flushed, partly from the Deltan metabolism running hot, but mostly from absolute, blinding fury. The dice roll, Mel. Willpower versus emotion. Skill, 3D. Difficulty, high, 20. Trying to maintain Starfleet composure while her deepest trauma is exposed. Roll, 2, 3, 1, 1 wild. Complication, -7. Catastrophic failure/emotional explosion. The confrontation. You hacked my medical file. Mel snarls, her voice dropping an octave, carrying the aggressive, sharp cadence of the man she used to be. The Deltan pheromones in the cramped cabin instantly spike, thick with stress and anger. Mel, Dan starts, holding his hands up defensively. That is classified level 4. Mel steps forward, her hands balled into fists, her body trembling violently. The vulnerability is too much. The walls of the tiny Valkyrie suddenly feel like they are crushing her. You had no right. You think because you have a gold pip you can just dissect me? Look at the freak. Look at the transporter accident. Stop, Dan says. He doesn't yell, but his voice is incredibly firm. He doesn't stand up to intimidate her, remaining seated, looking up at her with complete calm. Don't tell me to stop. Do you know what it's like? Mel shouts, her composure completely shattered. Tears of absolute frustration well in her eyes. To look in the mirror and not recognize the face looking back? To have a body that reacts to things you don't even want? To have to change in the dark because you feel like a pervert looking at yourself? I just want to fly the damn ship and be left alone. She turns away, hitting the bulkhead with the heel of her hand, breathing hard, waiting for the pity, waiting for the awkwardness, waiting for Dan to request a new co-pilot from Valak. But Dan doesn't do any of that. He hits a few buttons on his console, completely locking out the medical file and purging his access log, so Starfleet Medical won't track that he opened it. I'm sorry, Dan says quietly. He waits until she looks back over her shoulder at him. I didn't slice your file to gawk at you, Mel. I did it because we are flying into a war zone, and my co-pilot was bricking up on me. I needed to know if you were a flight risk. If you were going to freeze when the bugs started shooting. Dan swivels his chair fully around to face her. His expression is totally open, completely devoid of judgment or pity. I don't care about the transporter accident, Dan says, his voice steady and grounding. I don't care if you're human, Deltan, male, female, or all of the above. I care that you scored in the top 1% of your class in tactical ordnance. I care that when the hive swarms us, you're the one on the trigger. Mel stares at him, her chest heaving, the anger slowly draining out of her, replaced by a raw, terrifying exhaustion. You aren't going to report me unfit for duty? She asks, her voice small. No, Dan says. He extends a hand toward the empty right seat. Your secret is safe with me, Mel. I swear it. Nobody else on this ship will ever know. But in this cockpit, you don't have to hide who you are. If you want to talk like a guy from Earth, talk like a guy from Earth. If you need the temperature dropped because the Deltan blood runs hot, tell me. Just don't shut me out when the plasma starts flying. Mel looks at the empty co-pilot seat. Then she looks at Dan. For the first time since the accident that ruined her life, someone is looking at her and just seeing a pilot. She takes a slow, shaky breath. The overwhelming scent of stress pheromones in the cabin begins to dissipate. She walks back to the front of the cabin and slides into the right seat, buckling her heavy shock harness. The Starfleet tissue skirts are a tactical nightmare, Mel mutters, tugging at the hem of the uniform. The moment the gravity plating flickers, it's a disaster. Dan lets out a short, genuine laugh. I can imagine. We'll scrounge you some standard-issue trousers when we get back to the Liberty. Tell the quartermaster it's for thermal insulation. Mel looks over at him. A tiny, incredibly subtle smile touches the corner of her mouth. Thanks, Dan. Anytime, Mel. Now run a sweep on the forward long-range sensors. Let's find those bugs. The ambush. Time, 6 hours later. The tension in Gold 4 has completely evaporated, replaced by a smooth, synchronized professionalism. Mel is calling out sensor anomalies with sharp precision, and Dan is flying the Valkyrie like it's an extension of his own body. Gold Flight, this is Gold 1. Valak's voice suddenly cuts through the comms. I am reading a localized subspace displacement ahead. It matches the thermal exhaust signature of a hive convoy. "I've got it too, Commander," Mel says, her fingers flying over the tactical board. 3 heavy bioresin freighters. But they aren't alone. I'm reading an escort. 2 Cardassian Galar-class cruisers and a dozen Hideki fighters. In Gold 3, Jeklo cracks his knuckles. "That's a lot of armor for 4 flyers, Commander." "We're the Spear's tip, Ensign," Valak replies coldly. "We do not require armor. We require precision." Gold Flight, lock S-foils into attack position. Power up forward pulse cannons. The 4 heavy Valkyrie flyers bank in perfect unison, dropping into the dark sensor shadow of a nearby rogue asteroid to mask their approach. The tactical situation: the hive convoy is moving slowly. The 2 massive Galar cruisers are flanking the freighters, and the fighters are swarming in a protective sphere. Gold Flight. Wolfpack Protocol. Valak's voice transmits over the secure tactical channel, as cold and precise as a scalpel. Primary target: lead Galar-class cruiser. We will converge on its ventral axis. Concentrate all forward pulse cannons on the primary shield generator. We break its spine before the hive mind can compute our presence. On my mark. Inside the cramped cockpit of Gold 4, the tension of the last few hours crystallizes into absolute, razor-sharp focus. Dan O'Keefe grips the flight yoke, his eyes flicking between the massive, amber-glowing hive cruiser on the main viewport and the spatial telemetry on his console. "You heard the commander, Mel. Ventral axis. I'll get us under their guns. You crack the shell." Mel's hands dance across the tactical board with terrifying speed. The awkwardness, the physical dysphoria, the suffocating presence of her own skin, it all vanishes the moment the targeting scanners lock. Right now, she isn't a transporter accident. She is the weapon. "I see it," Mel says, her voice dropping into a sharp, aggressive cadence. "They've mutated the Cardassian deflector grid with bioresin, but there's a thermal bleed near the lower engineering hull. The resin doesn't dissipate heat efficiently. If we hit that exact coordinate, the feedback loop will shatter the grid." Dan grins, his heart pounding. "Feeding your telemetry to the rest of the flight. Let's show them how it's done." "Mark," Valak orders. The 4 heavy Valkyrie-class flyers drop out of the asteroid's sensor shadow like a synchronized thunderbolt. They don't scatter. They fly in a tight, diamond formation directly down the throat of the massive hive cruiser. The dice roll: Dan, piloting / Mel, gunnery synergy. Dan's skill: 5D, piloting. Dash rolls to provide a stable firing platform through heavy flak. Dan's roll: 5, 4, 6, 3, 5-23, flawless approach vector. Mel's skill: 6D, gunnery / ordnance specialist. Dash rolls to hit the exact thermal weak point. Mel's roll: 6, 5, 4, 6, 5, 5 wild. Dash 31, devastating precision. The Wolfpack strikes. The hive's automated sensors finally register the incoming threat. The Galar cruiser's massive amber disruptor banks swivel downward, filling the blackness of space with a chaotic web of superheated plasma fire. "Hold on," Dan shouts, throwing the heavy Valkyrie into a punishing, corkscrew dive. G-forces slam them both back into their shock seats. The inertial dampeners whine in protest. A disruptor beam the size of a shuttlecraft scorches past their port nacelle, close enough to trigger the proximity alarms. Dan doesn't flinch. He trusts Mel completely. He levels the ship out for exactly 1.5 seconds, a lifetime in a dogfight, giving her the perfect firing window. "Firing," Mel barks. She slams the firing studs. Gold 4's massive forward pulse cannons erupt. At the exact same microsecond, guided by Mel's telemetry, Gold 1, 2, and 3 fire. 4 concentrated beams of high-yield Starfleet pulse phaser energy converge on a single, 2-meter-wide patch of mutated bioresin on the cruiser's underbelly. The impact is spectacular. The thermal bleed overloads instantly. The Galar cruiser's ventral shields don't just collapse, they shatter like glass, sending a rippling shockwave of displaced energy out into the void. Shields are down. The grid is cracked. Mel yells, her eyes practically glued to the tactical sensors. Dan, pull up.
Give me the belly.
Dan hauls back on the yoke, rocketing the Valkyrie straight up along the massive, exposed hull of the cruiser. Micro-torpedoes armed, Mel says, her thumb sliding over the secondary trigger. Eat this, you ugly bastards. Thwump thwump thwump. A volley of micro-quantum torpedoes streaks from Gold 4's launchers, punching straight through the unshielded hull plating and detonating deep inside the Hive's ship's engineering section. Secondary explosions ripple across the cruiser's surface, blowing massive chunks of duranium and burning green resin out into space. The beast groans, its sublight engines sputtering and dying. The Wolfpack just crippled a capital ship in a single pass. Beautiful shot, Gold 4. Anna Shvetsov's cool voice crackles over the comms from Gold 3. I didn't know you had it in you, Stuful. Mel allows herself a tight, fierce grin. Just reading the wind, Lieutenant. The swarm responds. Do not celebrate yet. Valak cuts in, his voice devoid of adrenaline. The hive mind has recalculated. The escort screen is breaking formation. We have fighters inbound. Dan checks his rear sensors. The crippled Galer is out of the fight, but the second cruiser has positioned itself defensively over the 3 bioresin freighters. Worse, the dozen Hideki fighters have completely detached from the convoy. They're no longer flying in a standard protective sphere. They're swarming, moving with that terrifying, synchronized hive logic, accelerating straight toward the 4 Valkyries. 12 against 4, Dan says, his hands tightening on the yoke. And these Valkyries aren't exactly built for tight dogfighting. We're heavy bruisers. Then we don't dogfight, Mel says, her tactical mind racing. Dan, the Hidekis are light fighters. They rely on speed and numbers, but their forward shields are paper-thin compared to our pulse cannons. Gold flight. Valak's voice echoes in the cockpit. The freighters are the primary objective. The fighters are a distraction. We must break through their screen to reach the cargo. The tactical choice. The Hive fighters are closing fast, forming a literal wall between Gold flight and the vulnerable freighters. The Valkyries are heavily armed, but not highly maneuverable. Gemini said, Gold flight, divide into 2 ship elements. Valak's voice cuts through the comms, instantly adapting to the tactical reality. Gold 1 and 2, we are the spear. We juke the fighter screen and eliminate the bioresin freighters. Gold 3 and 4, you are the shield. Cull the Hideki swarm. Do not let them reinforce the convoy. In Gold 4, Dan O'Keefe flashes a quick, hard smile at Mel. You heard the boss. We're on crowd control. 6 on 2. Think you can shoot fast enough? Mel's hands blur across the tactical console, locking onto multiple incoming Hive signatures. The residual anger and dysphoria from an hour ago have vanished, replaced by the icy, hyper-focused flow state of combat. Just keep the nose pointed at the bugs, Dan. I'll squash them. The shield, Gold 3 and 4. The 12 Hideki fighters surge forward in a perfectly synchronized wave, amber disruptor bolts filling the void like a deadly rainstorm. Breaking formation. Dan yells, throwing Gold 4 into a punishing lateral slide. Beside them, Gold 3, piloted by the icy Anna Shvetsov, rolls in the opposite direction. They're tracking us. Jeklo's deep voice rumbles over the tactical net from Gold 3. I'm opening up. The heavy pulse cannons of the 2 Valkyries roar to life. Mel doesn't just fire blindly into the swarm. She uses the raw processing power of the Valkyrie's targeting computer combined with her own flawless instincts to anticipate the Hive's synchronized flight paths. Thwack thwack thwack. Her first 3-burst volley catches a Hideki squarely in its unshielded impulse manifold. The Cardassian fighter spins wildly out of control before detonating. A second later, Jeklo's heavy, brutal barrage from Gold 3 vaporizes another. But the Hive doesn't feel fear. The remaining 10 fighters adjust instantly, swarming the 2 heavy flyers like angry hornets. We're taking fire. Dan grunts, fighting the yoke as a disruptor beam grazes their port nacelle. The cockpit shudders violently. Sparks shower down from the overhead EPS conduits, filling the cramped cabin with the smell of ozone. Deflectors holding at 40%. Mel calls out, her eyes glued to the screen. She shifts power from the aft shields to the forward arrays, seamlessly adapting to Dan's aggressive evasive maneuvers. Bring us around 20 degrees Mark IV. I have a lock on 2 of them. Dan snaps the heavy flyer through a gut-wrenching turn. Mel hits the firing studs. 2 more micro-torpedoes streak into the void, turning 2 more Hive fighters into expanding clouds of plasma. In Gold 3, Anna is flying like a machine, her face completely expressionless as she threads her Valkyrie through a terrifying maze of amber energy. Jeklo, starboard thruster is overheating. Compensate with the cannons. Don't let them flank us. I'm on it, Lieutenant. Eat this. Hashtag the spear, Gold 1 and 2. While Dan and Anna tie up the fighter swarm in a brutal, chaotic furball, Valak and Mrak execute their run. Gold 2, follow my telemetry, Valak orders, his hands moving with Vulcan precision. He doesn't evade the enemy fire so much as he mathematically threads the needle between the incoming bolts. In the right seat of Gold 1, Robert Saul is sweating through his uniform. He is manually bypassing the safety limiters on the impulse engines to give Valak the microseconds of extra thrust he needs. Commander, if you push the manifold any harder, we're going to blow a relay. The relay is acceptable collateral, Ensign. The freighters are not. Beside them, Gold 2 is a terrifying sight. Mrak isn't flying with Vulcan logic. The Kytion is flying on pure, predatory instinct. She pushes her heavy Valkyrie into a reckless, screaming dive. I smell blood. Mrak hisses over the comms. In her co-pilot seat, the Balian farm boy Mattel looks like he might be sick, but his hands are locked onto the tactical console, feeding her the target locks. The 2 heavy flyers punch straight through the chaotic edge of the dogfight, completely ignoring the Hideki fighters, and bear down on the 3 massive bioresin freighters. The second Galer cruiser tries to bring its main disruptor banks around to protect the cargo, but it's too slow. Target locks confirmed. Valak states evenly. Fire. Gold 1 and Gold 2 unleash everything they have. A continuous, blinding stream of pulse phaser fire and the remainder of their micro-torpedoes slam into the 3 unarmored Hive freighters. The bioresin inside the cargo holds is highly volatile in its raw, unrefined state. The impact of the Starfleet ordnance triggers a catastrophic chain reaction. The 3 massive freighters don't just explode. They erupt into a blinding, searing shockwave of green and amber fire that illuminates the entire sector. The limp home. The shockwave from the exploding freighters hits the fighter swarm. The localized subspace disruption scrambles the Hive's automated sensors, sending the surviving Hideki fighters into a momentary, disorganized retreat. Primary targets destroyed. Valak's voice crackles, laced with static. Gold flight, reform on my coordinates. We are returning to the rendezvous point. It is a victory, but it is an ugly one. As the 4 Valkyries regroup and limp away from the debris field, the toll of the battle is obvious. Gold 2 has a massive scorch mark across its dorsal hull, and its port engine is trailing a thin stream of vented plasma. Gold 3's forward deflectors are completely burned out, leaving the arrowhead-shaped nose scarred and pitted. Inside Gold 4, the emergency lights are strobing red. Dan is leaning heavily back in his seat, his uniform soaked in sweat. He's manually nursing the starboard thrusters just to keep the ship flying in a straight line. You okay over there, Mel? Dan asks, his chest heaving. Mel wipes a smudge of soot from her cheek. She looks at the blinking, damaged tactical board, then over at Dan. Despite the sparking console and the smell of burnt wiring, she feels a strange, profound sense of calm. The cockpit doesn't feel like a cage anymore. It feels like a lifeboat. And the guy flying it didn't look at her with pity or disgust when the chips were down. I'm good, Dan, Mel says, and this time, the slight smile on her face reaches her eyes. Cannons are empty. Shields are cooked. But we're in one piece. Dan chuckles, coughing slightly on the ozone. Hell of a shooting, Stuful. You kept them off my back. You kept us from getting vaporized. Fair trade. The debrief. Location, Hangar Bay, USS Liberty. Time, 3 hours later. The USS Liberty drops out of warp exactly on schedule, opening its massive hangar bay doors to swallow the 4 battered Valkyries. The moment the magnetic clamps lock the heavy flyers to the deck, the hangar crews swarm them with fire suppressors and welding torches. The 8 pilots climb down from their ships. They look exhausted, bruised, and covered in grime. Valak stands at the front of the formation, his uniform miraculously unwrinkled, though there is a streak of soot across his cheek. He looks at his veteran pilots, then at the 4 replacements. Jeklo is stretching his massive green arms, looking exhilarated. Anna Shvetsov gives him a rare, approving nod. Mata looks like he wants to kiss the deck plating, while Mrak looks distinctly bored now that the hunt is over. Robert Saul is already pointing out the blown plasma relay to a deck chief. And Dan and Mel are standing shoulder to shoulder, looking at the smoking hull of Gold 4. Statistical survival rate for that engagement was 32%. Valak states flatly. You exceeded mathematical probability. Gold Flight functioned as designed. Valak looks directly at the 4 ensigns. You are no longer replacements. You are Gold Flight. Go to the mess hall.
Eat. Rest.
The Liberty jumps to the Argolis cluster in 6 hours. We launch again in 8. Valak turns and walks away to file his report. Dan claps Mel on the shoulder. Come on, Ace. Let's go see if the Liberty's replicators can make a decent cup of coffee. Mel nods, falling into step beside him. For the first time since the accident, she doesn't feel like she's walking in someone else's shadow. Gemini said Season 5, Episode 2, The VIP Cargo. Location, the Argolis Cluster. Time, 48 hours after the Tenebris sector ambush. The Argolis Cluster is a navigational nightmare. It is a massive, dense nebula of highly charged gravimetric shear and sensor-scattering heavy metals. The USS Liberty is creeping through the purple and gold gas clouds at sublight speeds, its massive single nacelle glowing bright to push through the resistance. Outside the destroyer, Gold 2 and Gold 3 are flying a wide escort screen, using their heavy Valkyrie pulse cannons to occasionally blast apart stray asteroids that drift too close to the mothership. Down in the Liberty's hangar bay, Gold 4 sits clamped to the deck, its starboard impulse manifold completely stripped down. Dan and Mel are covered in grease, helping the deck crews remachine the parts. They have to sit this one out, which leaves Gold 1 to play taxi. The cramped commute. Location. Interior, Gold 1. Valak sits in the pilot's seat, his eyes tracking the chaotic gravimetric eddies of the Argolis cluster. Next to him, Robert Saul is monitoring the EPS flow, ensuring the heavy flyer doesn't stall in the thick nebula gas. Behind them, in the tiny, claustrophobic living space meant for 2 off-duty pilots, sits Ambassador Sterling Vane. Vane is a high-ranking Federation diplomat assigned to negotiate supply lines with independent mining colonies on the edge of the cluster. He is wearing a tailored, civilian silk suit that looks entirely out of place against the scuffed duranium bulkheads of the Valkyrie. And he is incredibly, thoroughly bored. I still don't understand why Admiral Quinn couldn't spare a proper runabout. Vane complains loudly over the hum of the engines, leaning forward so his head is practically right between Valak and Saul's seats. This ship smells like weapon coolant and recycled sweat. And there isn't even a proper viewport back here. A runabout would be highly visible to Hive long-range sensors, Ambassador. Valak replies evenly, not taking his eyes off the flight yoke. The Valkyrie's ablative armor and low thermal profile make it the mathematically optimal vessel for smuggling a high-value asset through a hazard zone. Right. Asset. That's me. Vane sighs, leaning back against the edge of the lower sleep pod. He crosses his arms, looking for any kind of entertainment. His eyes drift to a tactical roster on Saul's secondary monitor. You know, I caught a look at your flight wing before we launched, Vane says, a sleazy, conspiratorial smirk spreading across his face. I have to say, Starfleet's recruitment standards have certainly developed since the war started. That Kytion pilot in Gold 2? Mrak, right? I've heard stories about Kytion females. Claws in the sheets, as they say. I bet she's a wild ride on shore leave. Robert Saul's hands freeze on his console. His knuckles instantly turn white. And don't even get me started on the girl in Gold 4. Vane continues, completely oblivious to the sudden, icy tension filling the cockpit. He lets out a low whistle. The one in the retro miniskirt. Mel? I didn't think Command allowed those uniforms on combat flyers, but I am certainly not complaining. Between the legs on her and the pheromones she was putting off on the deck, man, must be hard to concentrate with that walking around the hangar. Saul snaps. He unbuckles his heavy shock harness with a loud clack and twists his seat around, his face flushed dark red with anger. Hey, Ambassador, Saul growls, his blue-collar Utopia Planitia accent coming out thick and sharp. Those women are my wingmen. They cover my 6 and I cover theirs. You keep their names out of your mouth, or I'll come back there and show you exactly what a plasma spanner does to a silk suit. Vane blinks, his arrogant smirk faltering slightly, but his diplomatic privilege quickly shores up his ego. He straightens up, his face hardening. Excuse me, Ensign? Vane snaps, pointing a finger at Saul. I am a Federation ambassador with Class 1 clearance. You are a glorified bus driver. You will address me with respect, or I will have you stripped of those pips and thrown in the brig the second we dock at the colony. Try it, you piece of, Saul starts, half rising out of his seat. Ensign Saul. Valak's voice cuts through the cabin. It is not loud. It is not angry. But it carries the absolute, terrifying weight of a Starfleet commander. Saul stops. He glares at Vane, his jaw ticking, before slowly sinking back into his co-pilot seat. But he doesn't turn around. Valak finally takes his eyes off the forward viewport. He engages the autopilot with a soft chirp and slowly swivels his command chair to face the rear compartment. The Vulcan looks at the ambassador. His expression is completely blank, which somehow makes it infinitely more intimidating than Saul's anger. Ambassador Vane, Valak says, his tone perfectly flat, his enunciation razor-sharp. Ensign Saul's emotional outburst was a breach of Starfleet decorum. I will have him log a demerit. Vane sneers, adjusting his cuffs. See that you do, Commander. At least one of you understands the chain of command. However, Valak continues, seamlessly talking over the diplomat. His underlying premise was entirely accurate. The pilots of Gold Flight are a synchronized tactical unit. When you introduce derogatory variables regarding my crew, you degrade unit cohesion. When unit cohesion degrades, combat efficiency drops. Valak leans forward slightly. His dark eyes lock onto Vane's. Furthermore, I must inform you of the structural realities of the Valkyrie-class tactical flyer. The life support systems in the aft compartment are entirely segregated from the cockpit to prevent toxic atmospheric breaches during combat. Valak reaches out and casually taps a sequence on his console. A heavy, duranium privacy screen suddenly slides halfway out of the bulkhead, separating the cockpit from the living area. Should you continue to vocalize biological vulgarities regarding Lieutenant Mrak or Ensign Stufel, I will conclude that the atmospheric mixture in the aft compartment is negatively affecting your neurological functions, Valak says smoothly. Logic will then dictate that I purge the oxygen in your compartment and replace it with a low-level simethicene anesthetic gas for the remainder of the journey. For your own safety, of course. Vane's face drains of color. He looks at the heavy privacy door, then at the completely emotionless Vulcan. You wouldn't dare, Vane stammers. That is an assault on a Federation diplomat. I am a Vulcan, Ambassador. I do not bluff. I state mathematical probabilities, Valak replies. The probability of you remaining conscious if you speak another word is currently 0.0%. Do you require me to clarify the math? Vane swallows hard, shrinking back against the sleep pod. He shakes his head quickly.
No.
No, Commander. That won't be necessary. Fascinating. Your neurological functions appear to be stabilizing. Valak turns back to the front console, disengaging the privacy screen. He hits the autopilot override and takes the flight yoke back in his hands. Saul turns forward, a massive, triumphant grin plastered across his face. He looks over at Valak. Demerit logged, Commander, Saul whispers. Focus on your EPS flow, Ensign. Valak replies quietly. The cluster is becoming dense. The Argolis anomaly. Just as silence finally falls over the cramped ship, the Valkyrie suddenly shudders violently. The main tactical board flashes red. "Commander, I'm reading a massive gravimetric shear directly ahead." Saul shouts, his hands flying over the console as the ship is violently buffeted. "It just popped up out of nowhere. It's an Argolis gravity eddy." "I see it," Valak says, his hands gripping the yoke. Outside the canopy, the purple gas of the nebula twists into a terrifying, swirling vortex. The gravity well is immense, instantly grabbing hold of the heavy flyer and dragging it off course. Inertial dampeners are failing to compensate. Saul warns. "Brace for evasive maneuvers," Valak orders. In the back, Ambassador Vane, who arrogantly refused to strap into the sleep pod's crash webbing, suddenly realizes his mistake. Valak throws the Valkyrie into a punishing 90-degree vertical roll, punching the main thrusters to maximum to break the grip of the gravity eddy. The G-forces hit the ship like a physical hammer. From the aft compartment, there is a loud yelp, followed by the heavy, satisfying thud of Ambassador Vane being violently tossed across the tiny cabin and slamming into the reinforced bulkhead. Valak levels the ship out, successfully threading the flyer through the edge of the vortex and back into stable space. "Damage report, Ensign," Valak asks, his voice perfectly steady. Saul checks the board, suppressing a laugh. "Ship is green, Commander. EPS flow is stable." Saul glances over his shoulder. Vane is groaning on the deck plating, rubbing a rapidly forming lump on his forehead. Cargo appears to have shifted during transit, but remains intact. "Excellent," Valak notes. "Proceed on course." The Silent Colony. Location: Caldor Station, independent mining facility. Edge of the Argolis cluster. Time: 12 hours later. Gold 1 slips out of the swirling purple gas of the Argolis cluster, its ablative armor scorched and pitted from the microscopic debris of the nebula. Hanging in the blackness ahead is Caldor Station. It is a massive, brutalist piece of architecture built directly into a hollowed-out asteroid. Normally, a neutral mining hub like this would be buzzing with civilian freighters, Orion smugglers, and localized comms chatter.
Today it is a tomb.
"Standard orbital distance achieved," Valak notes, his hands hovering over the flight yoke. He does not decelerate fully. In the co-pilot seat, Robert Saul is frowning at his sensor readouts, tapping the screen with a grease-stained finger. "Commander, I'm not getting any automated docking telemetry. No traffic control. No beacon." Behind them, the privacy screen is open. Ambassador Vane is dabbing at the nasty bruise on his forehead with a silk handkerchief. He looks out the forward viewport and sighs impatiently.
"Well?"
"Bring us in, Commander," Vane snaps. These border colony administrators are notoriously lazy. They probably have their comms array turned down to save power. "Just find a bay and land so I can negotiate this miserable treaty, and we can get back to civilization." "Logic dictates caution, Ambassador," Valak replies, his eyes fixed on the station. "Ensign Saul, run a deep penetrating thermal sweep. Focus on the primary habitation ring." Saul punches the commands. He waits. His frown deepens. "Life support is running on auxiliary," Saul reports, his voice losing its usual blue-collar bravado, replaced by a tight, professional edge. "Thermal bloom is practically non-existent. It's freezing in there. I'm reading maybe 24 life signs huddled near the main reactor. This station is supposed to house 3,000 miners." "Pirates?" Vane asks, his voice suddenly losing a fraction of its arrogance. "Unlikely," Valak says. "Pirates would strip the reactor. The reactor is online. Set condition yellow, Ensign. Power up the forward pulse cannons." "Weapons hot, Commander," Saul confirms. "Take us into Hangar Bay 4. It appears to be open." The trap springs. Gold 1 glides silently into the massive cavern of Hangar Bay 4. The interior is pitch black, illuminated only by the heavy flyer's forward landing beams. There are no other ships. The deck plating is littered with abandoned cargo crates and loading mechs frozen in place. Valak touches the ship down with barely a bump. But he does not cut the impulse engines. The Valkyrie sits on the deck, purring like a caged tiger, ready to bolt.
Clang.
A heavy, metallic shudder echoes through the hull. Magnetic docking clamps just engaged from the station's control booth, Saul barks, his eyes glued to the tactical board. We're locked down. Somebody is operating the automated systems. Open a channel, Valak orders. Caldor Station, this is Federation Tactical Flyer Gold 1, Saul broadcasts. Disengage magnetic clamps immediately. You are holding a Federation ambassador against his. Saul stops. In the glow of the Valkyrie's landing beams, something is moving on the hangar walls. At first, it looks like a trick of the shadows. But as Saul magnifies the optics, the terrifying truth becomes clear. Creeping out of the ventilation shafts and spreading across the duranium bulkheads is a thick, pulsing web of sickly amber bioresin. The hive isn't coming to Caldor Station. They are already here. It's the bugs, Saul whispers, his blood running cold. In the back, Vane scrambles up to look over Saul's shoulder. That's impossible. We are completely off the grid. The hive doesn't strike independent colonies. They target Starfleet infrastructure. The hive mind absorbs raw materials, Ambassador. Valak corrects mathematically. A mining colony is a concentrated source of raw materials. We have flown directly into a localized assimilation node. Suddenly, the massive internal blast doors at the far end of the hangar bay begin to grind open. Through the widening gap steps a nightmare. They aren't Starfleet officers or Federation civilians. They are Caldor miners, men and women in heavy industrial EVA suits, but their movements are jerky, perfectly synchronized, and utterly silent. Thick, glowing amber tubes of bioresin have fused directly into their hazard suits, connecting to their spines and the heavy, industrial plasma cutters they carry in their hands. The hive hasn't just assimilated them, it has weaponized their mining equipment. There are dozens of them, pouring into the hangar bay, raising their plasma cutters toward the clamped Valkyrie. Commander, those mining cutters will carve through our ablative armor in under 2 minutes. Saul warns, his hands flying over the weapons console. Can you override the magnetic clamps from our system? Valak asks, his voice betraying zero panic. Negative. The lock is hardwired to the station's main computer in the control booth up there. Saul points through the canopy to a reinforced glass booth suspended 3 stories above the hangar floor. Someone has to physically go up there and smash the terminal, or we're sitting ducks. Vane backs away from the console, his face pale with absolute terror. We're going to die here. We're trapped in a tin can. The dice roll, Saul. Technical/sensors. Skill. For D. Difficulty, moderate, 15. Scanning the assimilated miners' weapons and finding a weakness. Roll. 4, 5, 3, 6 wild. Reroll, 2, 20 success. Commander, their plasma cutters are drawing power directly from the bioresin tubes on their backs. Saul realizes, reading the tactical scan. They're highly volatile. If I shoot the tubes, they'll pop like firecrackers. But I can't hit them with the ship's pulse cannons. The yield is too high. It'll blow the whole hangar and take us with it. Valak evaluates the tactical geometry in a fraction of a second. Ensign Saul, Valak says, unbuckling his flight harness. You are the superior mechanic. Can you hotwire the magnetic clamp release from the external landing skid? Maybe, Saul grunts, grabbing a heavy plasma spanner and his Starfleet tissue phaser pistol from the emergency rack. But I'll be completely exposed on the deck. You will not be exposed. I will provide covering fire, Valak says. The Vulcan reaches under his seat and pulls out a heavy, Type 3 Starfleet phaser rifle. He checks the power cell with practiced efficiency. He turns to the terrified ambassador. Ambassador Vane, you'll sit in the pilot seat. When Ensign Saul releases the clamps, you will push the primary throttle lever entirely forward. Do you comprehend this instruction? I'm a diplomat, not a pilot. Vane stammers. It is a single lever, Ambassador. The alternative is assimilation, Valak says coldly. Valak hits the manual release for the Valkyrie's belly hatch. The ramp drops open, letting the freezing, stale air of the dead station flood the cabin. Gemini said, Ambassador, the throttle. Do not touch anything else. Valak commands, his hand slapping the manual ramp release. The heavy lower hatch of the Valkyrie drops with a hiss of equalizing pressure. The freezing, stale air of the dead hangar bay rushes in, carrying the sickening, sweet smell of the amber bioresin. Robert Saul doesn't hesitate. He grabs his heavy plasma spanner, dives down the ramp, and slides on his back straight under the belly of the heavy tactical flyer. Above him, Valak steps onto the edge of the ramp. He raises the heavy Type 3 Starfleet phaser rifle to his shoulder. His breathing slows. His heart rate drops. To the Vulcan mind, the charging horde of assimilated miners is not a terrifying nightmare. It is simply a complex mathematical equation of trajectories, velocities, and weak points. "I have visual on the primary clamp housings," Saul shouts from beneath the ship, his voice echoing off the Duranium deck. "They've got a hardened Starfleet lockout. I have to strip the casing to cross the optical feeds. Proceed, Ensign. You have exactly 45 seconds before their plasma cutters breach our optimal defensive perimeter," Valak replies calmly. The dice roll, Valak, marksmanship/Saul, technical. Valak's skill, 60, gunnery/marksmanship. Valak's roll, 5-6-4, 5-6-4 wild. -30, surgical precision. Saul's skill, 5D, technical/mechanics. Saul's roll, 4-3-5-6-5 wild. -23, fast, expert repair. The Utopia Planitia fix. The first wave of assimilated miners raises their heavy industrial plasma cutters. Valak fires. He doesn't use a continuous beam. He uses short, high-intensity pulses. He doesn't aim for center mass. He aims precisely for the glowing amber bioresin tubes connecting the miners' hazard suits to their weapons.
Thwack.
The first pulse severs a tube perfectly. The highly pressurized, volatile resin instantly flash ignites. The assimilated miner explodes in a blinding flash of green fire, the concussive force knocking down the 3 drones standing next to him.
Thwack. Thwack. Thwack.
Valak operates the rifle like a metronome. Every shot finds a resin tube. The hangar bay is illuminated by a series of localized detonations, creating a wall of fire and concussive force that stalls the hive's advance. Under the ship, Saul is sweating profusely in the freezing air. Searing chunks of debris from the exploding miners rain down, clattering against the Valkyrie's ablative armor mere inches from his face. He jams the plasma spanner into the clamp housing, prying off the Duranium cover. He grabs a handful of optical data cables. Come on, bridging the primary interlock. A plasma cutter beam slices through the darkness, scorching the deck plating just millimeters from Saul's boot. 20 seconds, Ensign, Valak notes, seamlessly ejecting a spent power cell from the rifle and slapping a fresh one home in a fraction of a second.
Got it. Shorting it out. Now.
Saul screams, jamming the spanner across the exposed conduit. Sparks shower over him. A massive, metallic groan echoes through the hangar. Clunk. The magnetic clamps violently disengage, retracting into the deck. Clamps released. Punch it, Vane. Punch it. Saul yells, scrambling out from under the heavy belly of the ship and lunging up the ramp. In the cockpit, Ambassador Sterling Vane is hyperventilating, his hands shaking so violently he can barely grip the console. He hears Saul scream. He closes his eyes, grabs the heavy main throttle lever, and shoves it as far forward as it will go. The Valkyrie doesn't take off, it launches. The massive impulse engines scream, blasting a shockwave of superheated exhaust across the hangar bay that incinerates the front line of assimilated miners. The ship rockets forward. Saul is thrown flat onto the deck of the aft compartment by the sheer G-force. Valak, anticipating the inertial shift, grips the edge of the ramp bulkhead with one hand and slams the hatch close button with the other. The ramp seals shut just as the heavy tactical flyer scrapes violently against the upper rim of the hangar bay doors, tearing through the opening and rocketing out into the blackness of space. The horrifying truth. Level her out. Level her out, you idiot. Saul yells, dragging himself off the floor and sprinting into the cockpit. He shoves the panicked ambassador out of the pilot's seat and grabs the flight yoke, stabilizing the Valkyrie's trajectory as they blast away from Kaldor Station. Valak steps calmly into the cockpit, stowing the phaser rifle. Your mechanical improvisation was adequate, Ensign Saul. Yeah, well, my heart rate isn't, Saul breathes, his hands shaking as the adrenaline crash hits him. He taps the console, bringing the main deflector array back online, running a full sweep of the station and the planetoid below it to make sure they didn't launch any interceptors. Do so. We must ascertain the extent of the hive's infestation in this sector. Saul runs the deep-penetrating biothermal scan. As the data begins to scroll across the secondary monitor, his relief evaporates. Commander, Saul says, his voice dropping to a horrified whisper. I thought this was just a localized assimilation node. A staging ground. But look at these readings. Valak leans over the console. The scan of the massive, hollowed-out asteroid below Kaldor Station reveals the horrifying truth. The hive hasn't just infected the mining tunnels with bioresin. Deep within the core of the planetoid, where the central magma vents provide massive thermal energy, there is a biological signature so immense it dwarfs a capital ship. It is pulsing. It is incubating. Is that a Leviathan? Vane asks, his voice trembling as he stares at the massive red bloom on the screen. Are they building another brood ship down there? Negative, Valak says. The Vulcan's face remains blank, but the cadence of his voice slows, registering the profound strategic catastrophe. A Leviathan is a vessel. This biological mass has fused permanently with the planetoid's tectonic and geothermal infrastructure. It is drawing nutrients directly from the core. Saul looks up, his eyes wide. It's a queen. A host queen. The mathematical implications are devastating, Valak states, his hands resting on the edge of the console. Starfleet Command's working hypothesis was that the hive relied on central staging grounds in Cardassian and Romulan space to push their borders. We believed if we broke their supply lines, they would wither. Valak points to the massive, pulsing signature on the screen. This invalidates that hypothesis. The hive is not merely conquering territory. They are seeding it. Every planet, every colony, every station they assimilate is implanted with a host queen. Each fallen world becomes a self-sustaining hive hub, capable of gestating its own fleets and armies entirely independent of the main swarm. Saul slumps back in his co-pilot seat. It's not an invasion, Commander. It's an infection. Every rock they touch becomes a new homeworld. Even Ambassador Vane is silent, the arrogant bluster completely stripped away by the sheer, existential scale of the threat staring back at them from the sensor screen. Ensign Saul, lay in a course for the USS Liberty. Maximum warp, Valak orders, turning his back on the screen. Admiral Quinn must be informed. The war we thought we were fighting ended today. A new one has just begun. Gemini said Season 5, Episode 3, The Ghost World. Location, High Orbit, New Halcyon. Time, 1 month after the discovery of the host queens. The USS Liberty hangs in the silent void above New Halcyon. In the main briefing room just off the hangar deck, the 8 pilots of Gold Flight stand around the holographic tactical table. The mood is incredibly heavy. The last time the 14th Tactical Wing was in this airspace, half the squadron was wiped out and LCDR. Cole Mercer detonated a warp core to save the civilian transports. But the holographic projection of the planet floating between them doesn't match the hellscape they remember. Sensors confirm the initial long-range reports, Valak says, his voice cutting through the silence. The atmospheric spore choke has dissipated. The amber bioresin that previously blanketed the northern continent has calcified and broken down into inert organic dust. Wait, so the bugs just died? Dan O'Keefe asks, leaning over the table. I was flying Gold 4 right above the deck when we pulled out. That resin was eating the duranium bulkheads. It doesn't just turn to dust. It does not, Valak agrees. Furthermore, the planetary flora has reclaimed the surface. Standard Class M vegetation. The duranium domes of the outer colonial city remain structurally intact, despite surviving the shockwave of Commander Mercer's warp core breach. What about the host queen? Robert Saul asks, crossing his arms. If every planet gets a queen, where's the one that hatched here? Valak taps the console. The thermal imaging sweeps the planet. It is completely blue and green. No red blooms. No massive biosignatures. Absent, Valak states. The planet is completely devoid of hive signatures. It is also devoid of humanoid life signs. It is a ghost world. Admiral Quinn has ordered Gold Flight to conduct a low-altitude reconnaissance and a ground investigation. We must ascertain what sterilized this environment. If we can replicate it, we may have a weapon against the host queens. Valak looks around the table. Suit up. We launch in 10. The return to the crater. Location: surface, New Halcyon. The 4 heavy Valkyrie-class flyers punch through the atmosphere. There is no abrasive spore cloud to scorch their shields this time. The sky is a clear, heartbreakingly beautiful blue. Inside Gold 4, Mel Stuffel's hands are tight on the tactical console. Dan glances over at her from the pilot's seat. You doing okay, Mel? Dan asks quietly over the internal comms. I know returning to the site of a massacre isn't exactly easy. I'm fine, Dan, Mel replies, her voice tight but professional. She stares out the canopy. Mercer gave his life, so those 4,000 colonists could get up the chute. We owe it to him to figure out what happened to his gravesite. Gold Flight, we are approaching Ground Zero. Valak's voice echoes over the comms. Switching to repulsor lift. Bring us down in the central plaza. The 4 flyers glide over the ruined colonial city. The outer domes are indeed intact, though overgrown with rapidly creeping green vines and moss. In the center of the city is a massive, perfectly spherical crater of fused glass, the epicenter of Mercer's warp core breach. But surrounding the glass crater, where the hive's towering, muscular anti-air spires used to be, there are only crumbling, gray, ash-like statues of calcified bioresin. The Valkyries touch down on the edge of the glass crater. The ramps lower, and the 8 pilots step out onto the surface, phaser rifles raised. It is dead silent. Only the wind rustling through the overgrown vines breaks the quiet. Mrak, the Kytion pilot from Gold 2, steps off her ramp and immediately drops to a crouch. She takes a deep breath through her nose, her tail twitching erratically. The air tastes wrong, Mrak hisses, her golden eyes scanning the empty duranium buildings. There is no smell of rot. No smell of the hive. It is too clean, like a surgical ward. Spread out. Maintain visual contact, Valak orders, his phaser rifle sweeping the perimeter. Ensign Saul, Ensign Stufel, initiate microscans of the calcified resin. The anomaly. Mel and Saul move toward one of the crumbling, gray structures that used to be a hive flak cannon. Mel runs her tricorder over it. Commander, Mel calls out, her brow furrowing. This wasn't a natural die-off. The cellular structure of the resin has been aggressively targeted. It's like molecular acid but specific only to hive DNA. It dissolved the binding agents and left the surrounding Earth-standard vegetation completely unharmed. A biological weapon? Anna Shvetsov asks, chewing her gum slowly as she keeps her rifle trained on an empty alleyway. Commander. Mautel's voice suddenly rings out. The Balian farm boy from Gold 2 is standing near a ruined administration building about 50 yards away. I've got an energy signature. It's buried in the rubble. The squad converges on Mautel's position. Buried halfway into a collapsed duranium wall is a sleek, black metallic cylinder. It is heavily scorched from atmospheric entry, but the Starfleet registry numbers are still visible on its flank. It's a Class 8 quantum torpedo casing. Jeklo grunts, the massive Orion easily hauling a chunk of debris off the cylinder. But that's impossible, Dan says, lowering his rifle. Mercer's Peregrine fighter didn't carry Class 8 torpedoes. Only capital ships and our Valkyries carry ordnance that heavy. And this wasn't fired during our extraction. The trajectory angle is wrong. This came from high orbit, straight down. Ensign Saul. Open it, Valak commands. Saul pulls his plasma spanner and gets to work on the torpedo's access panel. He bypasses the locking mechanism and pulls the heavy casing open. The dice roll, Saul, Technical. Skill. 5D. Difficulty. Easy. 10. Opening a standard Starfleet casing. Roll. 3, 4, 5, 2, 4-18 success. Saul looks inside. He blinks, then pulls out his tricorder and scans it again. Commander, there's no warhead in here, Saul says, looking up at the group. No antimatter. No detonator. The payload bay is completely empty. Then what was its purpose? Valak asks, kneeling next to the casing. It's a dispersal canister, Mel says, suddenly realizing what she's looking at. She points to a series of microvalves along the interior of the torpedo. It wasn't meant to explode. It was meant to hit the ground, crack open, and vent something into the atmosphere, like an aerosol. Mrak sniffs the interior of the casing and recoils, her ears flattening against her head. Chemicals. Cold and bitter. Someone fired a Starfleet delivery torpedo into the city after we left, venting a biological agent that selectively targeted and calcified the hive resin, Valak deduces mathematically. The agent killed the local infestation, forcing the host queen to abandon the planet before she could fully root. But who? Dan asks. The Liberty didn't fire it. Starfleet Command thought this planet was lost. Saul runs his plasma spanner over a secondary data port hidden beneath the microvalves. There's a localized data recorder in here. It's heavily encrypted. Paranoid levels of encryption. I don't think this is standard Starfleet tactical.
Gemini said.
Do not attempt to slice the encryption in the field, Valak orders, his voice carrying absolute authority. If the dispersal mechanism was armed with a biological agent, tampering with the primary casing could trigger a secondary release. Jeklo, Saul. Secure the casing. We return to the Liberty. Jeklo slings his phaser rifle over his massive green shoulder and steps up to the torpedo. With a grunt of effort, the Orion hefts the heavy Starfleet ordnance, carrying it back to the landing zone while Saul covers him. They load the scorched casing into the aft compartment of Gold One. Within minutes, the 4 Valkyries lift off from the fused glass crater of New Halcyon, leaving the ghost world behind. The stasis theory. Location: Secure Science Lab 4, USS Liberty. Time: 6 hours later. The torpedo casing sits inside a sealed, transparent biohazard containment field. Outside the glass, Valak, Mel, Saul, and Admiral Quinn, appearing via a secure subspace holographic projection from the Challenger, are reviewing the telemetry. Mel is running the chemical breakdown of the bitter, cold residue Mrak smelled inside the casing. Her eyes widen as the Starfleet computer finally matches the compound. Admiral, Commander, Mel says, pulling up the molecular schematic on the main monitor. That aerosol wasn't the weapon. It was a leash. Explain, Ensign, Quinn says, his holographic brow furrowing. It's a highly advanced, localized stasis compound, Mel explains, her technical mind racing. It completely suspends kinetic and biological activity at a microscopic level. You wouldn't use this to kill something. You would use this to keep something asleep while it was inside the torpedo. Robert Saul stares at the empty casing. If the gas was just the packaging, what was the payload? Valak's dark eyes lock onto the sensor readouts. Nanites, the Vulcan states. Microscopic, self-replicating synthetic machines. The room goes dead silent. Nanite weaponry is strictly outlawed by the Federation. The Borg use nanoprobes to assimilate. Using them as a weapon is considered an atrocity. The mathematical profile fits perfectly. Valak continues, his voice devoid of emotion but heavy with the implication. The calcification of the bioresin. The complete absence of hive biomass. A chemical or biological weapon would leave organic sludge or mutated variants. Nanites, programmed to devour all complex living tissue associated with a hive, would consume the target, utilize the raw matter to replicate and spread across the planet, and then, upon running out of their programmed food source, they would intentionally power down and degrade into inert dust. Leaving only simple vegetation behind, Mel realizes, feeling a cold chill run down her spine. The stasis aerosol was loaded into the torpedo so the nanites wouldn't wake up and eat the crew of the ship that launched them. They sleep in the tube. The torpedo hits the atmosphere, cracks open, the stasis gas dissipates, and they wake up hungry. Admiral Quinn looks horrified. A rogue Starfleet scientist. Someone took it upon themselves to engineer a planetary-scale xenocide weapon. And they are using our ordnance to deliver it. Admiral, Valak says, we must ascertain the perimeter of this deployment. If these nanites mutate their programming, or if the stasis leash fails, they will not stop at the hive. They will devour every living tissue in the quadrant. Agreed, Quinn says grimly. Commander Valak, take Gold Flight. I am sending you the coordinates of 4 more hive-occupied worlds in your sector. Find out how far this ghost zone extends. The ghost sector, Montash. Location, the border sectors. Time, 1 week of patrols. For the next 7 days, the USS Liberty jumps from system to system, launching Gold Flight to conduct high-speed, low-altitude reconnaissance runs over planets that Starfleet intelligence flagged as massive hive strongholds. The dice roll, Gold Flight, astrogation/sensors. Skill, 5D, flight average. Difficulty, moderate, 15. Scanning deeply assimilated worlds for any trace of the nanite origin. Roll, 5, 6, 3, 4, 6 wild. Reroll, 2-26, extensive, flawless mapping. The results are mathematically impossible, yet undeniable. Planet, Targus 3. Previously classified as a Class 4 hive incubation world. Gold Flight visual. The massive, glowing amber oceans of bioresin are gone. They have been replaced by vast, empty deserts of gray, calcified dust. Gold 3 and Gold 4 fly nap of the Earth for 2 hours. Not a single hive interceptor launches. Not a single drone is seen. It is dead. Planet, Aurelius Minor. Previously a heavily defended industrial assimilation hub. Gold Flight visual. Mrak and Motel in Gold 2 glide over the silent, rusted skeletons of orbital shipyards that have crashed into the planet's surface. The prey is gone. Mrak hisses over the comms, her tail lashing in agitation inside the cockpit. There is no honor in a silent forest. This is the work of a coward. Planet Vorn. A jungle world entirely converted to feed a host queen. Gold Flight visual. Anna Shvetsov chews her gum methodically in the cockpit of Gold 3 as Jeklo runs the scanners. The alien jungle has reclaimed the hive structures perfectly. No biosignatures, Lieutenant, Jeklo grunts, his heavy brow furrowed. It's a graveyard. Just plants and ghosts. The debrief in the dark. Location, crew quarters, USS Liberty. Time, the end of the patrol. The 8 pilots of Gold Flight are crammed into the small auxiliary mess hall on the Liberty, eating standard rations after a grueling 20-hour flight rotation. The atmosphere is tense. They are tactical combat pilots, trained to fight cruisers and dogfight interceptors. Flying over dead world after dead world is taking a psychological toll. Dan O'Keefe pushes his tray away, rubbing his tired eyes. 4 planets. Billions of hive drones. Entire fleets that were being grown in those bioresin pools.
Gone.
Without firing a single phaser. It's efficient, Anna Shvetsov notes coldly, taking a sip of black coffee. The bugs were going to overrun the Argolis cluster in a month. Whoever this rogue scientist is, they just saved the Federation. Robert Saul slams his hand on the table, rattling the trays. They didn't save us, Anna. They uncorked a demon. You heard Stufel. If those nanites decide they like the taste of human DNA, or if that stasis aerosol fails on the launch pad, they'll eat the Liberty in 5 minutes. We're flying around with a loaded gun pointed at our own heads, and we don't even know who has their finger on the trigger. Mel sits quietly next to Dan, staring into her mug. As someone whose life was irrevocably altered by a scientific anomaly, the idea of microscopic machines altering and devouring biology on a planetary scale makes her skin crawl. Valak sits at the head of the table. He does not eat. He merely steeps a cup of Vulcan spice tea. Ensign Saul's emotional distress is valid, despite his elevated decibel level. Valak says calmly. We are facing a binary outcome. Either the rogue scientist succeeds in completely exterminating the Hive, violating every ethical mandate of the United Federation of Planets, or Mrak purrs, her golden eyes narrowing at the Vulcan. Or, Valak replies, the hive mind encounters the nanites on the next targeted world, computes their molecular structure, and adapts. If the hive learns to assimilate the nanites, they will not merely terraform planets. They will possess the ability to instantly dissolve Starfleet vessels at the molecular level. The mess hall goes dead silent. The pilots look at each other. So, what's our mission, Commander? Dan asks quietly. Our mission, Lieutenant O'Keefe, is to find the ghost before the hive does. Valak stands up, picking up a PADD. Admiral Quinn has isolated a subspace distortion pattern consistent with a heavily cloaked vessel operating near the edges of these dead systems. Gold Flight will launch at 0600. We are going hunting. Gemini said Season 5, Episode 4. The Tartarus Black Site. Location: the border sectors, deep space. Time: 2 weeks later. The montage of dead worlds continues. The 14th Tactical Wing spends days jumping between assimilated colonies, only to find the same eerie, calcified graveyards. The hive is being systematically erased by an invisible hand. But a ghost can only hide for so long. Inside Gold 4, Mel Stuffel's eyes are burning from staring at the tactical readouts for 12 hours straight. She has the empty torpedo casing's encrypted data recorder running on a continuous loop in her secondary buffer, looking for a match in the ambient background radiation of the sector. Suddenly, her console chimes. A single, sharp ping. Dan, bring us around, Mel says, sitting up straight, the exhaustion vanishing instantly. Heading 21 Mark 7. I've got a subspace echo. Dan banks the heavy Valkyrie. What is it? A ship?
No.
It's an automated navigational buoy, transmitting on a highly restricted Starfleet intelligence frequency, Mel says, her fingers flying over the keys. It's using the exact same encryption algorithm as the dispersal torpedo we found on New Halcyon. Gold Flight, intercept and investigate. Valak orders over the tactical net. The 4 heavy flyers follow the invisible breadcrumb trail deep into a rogue asteroid belt, far outside any charted Federation shipping lanes. The ambient radiation in the belt is thick, masking any long-range scans. As they navigate the spinning rocks, the massive shadow of an asteroid parts to reveal a structure. It is a Starfleet deep space science installation, but it carries no registry number on its hull. Its external lights are dead. It hangs in the void, spinning slowly, completely dark. I'm reading minimal life support, but no life signs, Robert Saul reports from Gold 1. Thermal bloom is practically zero. It's a blackout station. A ghost town. Gold 3 and 4, establish a combat air patrol perimeter, Valak commands. Gold 1 and 2, we will board. Ensign Saul, Ensign Stuffel, you are with me. Mrak, Jeklo, you will provide security. Weapons set to heavy stun until we ascertain the threat level. Boarding in the dark. Location: Hangar Bay, Black Site Station. Valak and Mrak set Gold 1 and 2 down gently on the unlit deck of the station's primary hangar. The artificial gravity is functioning at half capacity, making every step feel light and slightly disorienting. The boarding party steps off the ramps. Valak, Saul, Mel, Mrak, and Jeklo switch on the shoulder lamps of their environmental suits. The beams of white light cut through the absolute darkness, illuminating thick layers of dust on the duranium bulkheads. Mrak takes the point that Cytian's night vision is far superior to the humans, and her ears pivot constantly, listening to the groaning metal of the station. The air is stale. Mrak hisses softly, her tail lashing behind her. It smells of ozone and old fear. But no blood. No rot. Keep a tight formation, Valak orders, raising his phaser rifle. Ensign Stuffel, guide us to the main laboratory. Mel checks her tricorder, the blue glow underlighting her face. Taking the primary turbolift shaft. The cars are dead. We'll have to climb the maintenance ladders. The team moves silently through the derelict station. It is incredibly eerie. Coffee mugs sit half-empty on desks in the administrative ring. Pads are scattered across the floors. There is no sign of a struggle, no phaser burns on the walls. It looks like the crew simply stood up and vanished. They reach the main laboratory doors. They are sealed shut with heavy, magnetic quarantine locks. Saul, force it, Valak says. Saul jams his plasma spanner into the wall panel, shorting out the magnetic lock. Jeklo, the massive Orion, steps up, wedges his thick green fingers into the seam of the heavy blast doors, and wrenches them apart with a grunt of raw physical exertion. The Frankenstein lab. The beams of their shoulder lamps sweep into the laboratory. It is massive.
And it is horrifying.
Lining the walls are a dozen heavy, reinforced cylindrical stasis tubes. The glass on several of them is shattered from the inside out. But it's what is inside the intact tubes that makes the blood run cold in Mel's veins. Commander. Mel whispers, her light steadying on one of the central tubes. Floating suspended in a pale green preservation fluid is a humanoid figure. Its skin is a dead, mottled gray. One of its eyes has been replaced by a mechanical ocular implant, and its left arm terminates in a heavy array of surgical tools and assimilation tubules. Borg, Saul breathes, instinctively raising his phaser rifle. They are inert, Ensign, Valak states, walking calmly into the room, though his eyes narrow in profound logical disapproval. These are drones that were severed from the collective, likely salvaged from a destroyed cube. They were experimenting on them. Jeklo rumbles, looking at the surgical tables covered in microlasers and restraints. Mel rushes to the central computer console. It's dark, but she pulls the power cell from her phaser pistol and forcibly hotwires it into the terminal's primary intake. The console flickers to life, casting a harsh blue glow across the dead Borg drones. The dice roll, Mel, Computer Ops/Investigation. Skill, 60. Difficulty, very difficult, 20. Bypassing heavily encrypted black site science logs. Roll, 5, 6, 4, 5, 6, 6 wild. Dash, reroll wild die dash, 2. Total, 5 plus 6 plus 4 plus 5 plus 6 plus 6 plus 2 is equal to 34, masterful slicing. Mel's fingers fly across the glass interface, tearing down the firewalls with the focused intensity of someone who hates reckless Starfleet science experiments more than anyone else in the room. I'm in, Mel says, her eyes rapidly scanning the scrolling text. Project Lazarus. It was a highly classified Starfleet intelligence initiative. When the Hive War started going badly, Section 31 commandeered the station. They brought in captured Borg drones. To do what? Saul asks, stepping up behind her. To harvest their nanoprobes, Mel says, a look of utter revulsion crossing her face. The Borg use nanoprobes to assimilate living tissue. The scientists here managed to isolate the nanoprobes, strip away the collective's command code, and reprogram them. They turned assimilation into consumption. They built a microscopic weapon designed to eat the Hive's bioresin, then starve and die. Playing God with Borg tech, Dan O'Keefe's voice crackles over the comms from his CAP outside. That's how you get the entire quadrant assimilated, Mel. Where are the scientists? Mel tabs through the personnel files. There was an accident. The first batch of weaponized nanites breached containment. It didn't eat the bioresin, it ate the scientists. The automated quarantine protocols vented the atmosphere to stop the spread. The entire staff was dissolved into inert dust. That's why the station is empty. The recent visitor. Valak walks over to the console, his posture rigid. If the staff was exterminated, who is firing the torpedoes? Mel frowns, her hands dancing over the keyboard to check the station's access logs. Wait, Mel says, her voice dropping. This terminal, it wasn't powered down because of the accident. It was manually put into a sleep cycle. And the main synthesizer logs. Saul looks at the diagnostic screen. He wipes a gloved finger across the edge of the console. It comes away clean. No dust. Someone wiped this console down, Saul says, his voice tight. The primary replication vats were activated, Mel confirms, her heart beginning to hammer. Someone came here. Someone who knew the access codes. They bypassed the quarantine, downloaded the Lazarus nanoprobe formula, and synthesized a massive stockpile of the weapon. They loaded it into Starfleet torpedo casings and took it. M'Rak suddenly drops to a crouch near the shattered stasis tubes. She sniffs the deck plating. "Commander," the Kytion hisses, her fangs bared. "The scent of ozone is old. But there is a new scent. Synth-CAF. Engine grease. Sweat." M'Rak looks up, her golden eyes locking onto Valak. The prey was here. Recently. Within the last 48 hours. The ambush protocol. Before Valak can issue an order, the blue lights of the computer console suddenly snap to a blinding, violent red. "Warning. Unauthorized access detected. Project Lazarus quarantine protocols are engaged." Heavy duranium blast shutters slam down over the laboratory's exit, sealing Valak, Mel, Sol, M'Rak, and Jeklo inside the tomb with the dead Borg. "Commander," Anna Shvetsov's voice suddenly screams over the tactical comms from outside the station. "We have incoming." Multiple warp signatures dropping out of subspace. "Is it the rogue scientist?" Valak demands, raising his rifle as the laboratory's automated defense turrets begin to drop from the ceiling. "Negative," Anna shouts, her Valkyrie's pulse cannons already firing in the background. "It's the Hive. 2 cruisers and a swarm. They tracked the subspace echo of the buoy just like we did. They're hitting the station." The entire station shudders violently as the Hive capital ships open fire on the derelict Starfleet hull. The rogue scientist didn't just leave a breadcrumb trail. They left a trap, and Gold Flight walked right into it. Gemini said. "Commander." Anna's voice yells over the comms, practically drowned out by the scream of her Valkyrie's pulse cannons. "The Hive cruisers are locking onto the station. I can't hold them off, wait." What is the station doing? Inside the laboratory, the blinding red quarantine lights suddenly snap to a cold, sterile white. The deck plates beneath Valak, Mel, Sol, Jeklo, and M'Rak begin to vibrate with the massive, deep hum of a primary warp core coming online. The Tartarus Black site isn't dying. It is waking up. "Commander, the power output is spiking off the charts." Mel shouts, her hands still locked onto the terminal. "It's bypassing the quarantine. The station's defense grid isn't targeting us, it's targeting the Hive." The synthetic army. The heavy duranium blast doors that Jeklo had pried open suddenly retract seamlessly into the walls. Jeklo raises his massive fists, and Valak levels his phaser rifle, bracing for a swarm of Hive drones to pour into the room. But that isn't what comes through the doors. Stepping out of the darkness of the corridors is a squad of humanoid figures. They are identical, clad in dark gray, utilitarian jumpsuits devoid of rank or insignia. Their skin is a pale, synthetic polymer, and their eyes are flat, glowing optical sensors. They are androids. Cold, mechanical, and perfectly synchronized. "Hold your fire," Valak orders sharply. The androids march right past Gold Flight. They don't raise weapons. They don't even turn their heads to look at the Starfleet officers. They move with terrifying, absolute purpose, stepping over the cables and debris to interface directly with the shattered stasis tubes and the primary environmental controls. "They're completely ignoring us," Sol whispers, lowering his plasma spanner. M'Rak's tail lashes violently. "They have no scent, no soul, just machines." The endgame, the front row seat. "CAG, you need to see this." Dan O'Keefe's voice crackles over the comms from Gold 4, sounding completely awestruck. The station just opened dozens of hidden torpedo bays. Outside in the blackness of space, the derelict Tartarus station unleashes hell. A massive, synchronized barrage of black, unmarked torpedoes streaks into the void, completely ignoring the swarm of Hideki fighters and slamming directly into the hulls of the 2 massive Hive Galer-class cruisers. But there are no antimatter explosions. Instead, the torpedoes crack open upon impact, venting thick clouds of the bitter, cold stasis aerosol. As the gas dissipates into the vacuum, the payloads awaken. They're not exploding, they're dissolving. Anna Shvetsov reports, her usual icy demeanor cracking. Gold Flight has a front row seat to the apocalypse. The nanites, starved and hyper-aggressive, immediately begin to devour the bioresin armor of the Hive cruisers. The towering organic structures on the ship's hulls wither and turn to gray, calcified ash in seconds. The Hive ships shudder violently, their engines sputtering and dying as the microscopic machines eat their way through the organic circuitry and the flesh of the assimilated crews inside. Within 2 minutes, the Hive swarm completely stops dead in space. The terrible, amber glow of their weapons goes dark. The nanites, Mel breathes, watching the tactical telemetry scroll across the lab's console. They just sterilized 2 capital ships from the inside out. The cages. Suddenly, the console in front of Mel locks out. Before anyone can react, 5 individual hums of displaced energy echo through the laboratory.
BZZZT.
Brilliant blue, cylindrical force fields drop from ceiling emitters, slamming into the deck plating and completely enclosing Valak, Mel, Sol, Jeklo, and Rak in individual, soundproof cages. "Hey!" Sol yells, slamming his hands against the energy barrier. It sparks violently, throwing him backward onto the deck. Jeklo roars and unloads his phaser rifle point-blank into the shield, but the energy beam simply disperses across the cylinder. Valak does not move. He simply raises an eyebrow, running his tricorder over the interior of his cage. "Do not expend your energy. These are Class 10 containment fields. They are designed to hold Borg drones. We cannot break them from the inside. They are trapped, perfectly safe from the Hive, but completely immobilized." The departure. Through the shimmering blue energy of her cage, Mel watches the androids. Having primed the station systems, the synthetic crew moves in perfect unison to the center of the laboratory. They step onto a series of concealed, heavy-duty transporter pads built directly into the floor. The androids do not look at their Starfleet captives. They simply stare straight ahead as the transporter beams lock onto them. In a flash of blinding white light, the android crew beams out of the Tartarus station and directly onto the dead, calcified hulls of the Hive cruisers outside. "Commander." Dan's voice comes through the comms, heavy with static. "The Hive ships, their impulse engines just reignited. The bioresin is dead, but someone is manually flying them. They're turning away." Valak stands perfectly still in his cylinder. The androids. They use the nanites to exterminate the biological components of the Hive cruisers, leaving the mechanical chassis intact. They are commandeering the enemy fleet. Outside, the 2 massive, ash-covered cruisers spool up their warp drives. In a flash of distorted starlight, they jump to warp, vanishing into the unknown, leaving the Valkyries and the derelict station completely alone in the dark. The Tartarus Black Site powers down, returning to its silent, eerie slumber. Only the blue glow of Gold Flight's force field cages illuminates the laboratory. "Whoever is behind this," Mel says, her voice echoing softly in her cylinder, the terrifying reality of the rogue scientists' plan finally settling in. They aren't just trying to kill the Hive. They're stealing their ships to build an armada. And they don't care who gets in their way. Gemini said Season 5, Episode 5, The Shadows Pitch. Location, Tartarus Black Site / High Orbit. Time, immediate continuation. Outside the derelict station, the void of space is suddenly very quiet. The Hive ships have warped away, piloted by their new synthetic masters, leaving the heavy Valkyrie flyers hovering in the dark. Inside Gold 3, Lieutenant Anna Shvetsov's hands fly across her transporter console. "Dan, the station's atmospheric shielding is erratic, but I've found a gap in the dispersion field. I can bounce you into the main corridor just outside the lab, but I have to stay here to keep the pattern buffer stabilized for emergency extraction." In the cramped cockpit of Gold 4, Dan O'Keefe grabs his phaser pistol and checks the charge. "Copy that, Anna. Keep the engine running. Energize." The familiar hum of the Starfleet transporter fills the cockpit, and Dan dissolves into a column of shimmering blue light. The walk in the dark. Dan materializes in the pitch-black corridor of the Tartarus Black Site. He switches on a shoulder lamp, the beam cutting through the floating dust. The station is dead quiet again, save for the distant, metallic groans of the failing life support systems. He moves slowly, phaser raised, his boots echoing softly on the duranium deck. He passes the empty, open stasis tubes and the scorch marks from the automated turrets. He finally reaches the heavy, retracted blast doors of the main laboratory. Inside, the room is bathed in the eerie blue light of 5 Class 10 containment force fields. Dan, Mel says, pressing her hands against the inside of her energy cage. The relief on her face is palpable. Hold tight, guys, Dan says, stepping into the lab and immediately moving toward the primary terminal. Anna's got a lock on us, but I need to drop these local dampening fields before she can beam you through the bulkheads. Lieutenant O'Keefe, exercise caution, Valak warns from his cylinder, his voice perfectly level. The station's primary AI has been compromised. Before Dan's fingers can even touch the console, the screens flash. The blue lights of the force fields dim slightly, and the central hololithic projector embedded in the ceiling winds to life. A column of hard light renders in the center of the room, directly between Dan and the trapped boarding party. It is a humanoid figure, but the projection is intentionally degraded. The face is obscured by heavy digital static, rendering it nothing more than a silhouette of shifting, dark gray pixels. When it speaks, the voice is a synthesized, genderless harmonic that echoes from every speaker in the room simultaneously.
The pitch.
You fight with remarkable efficiency, Gold Flight, the shadowed figure says. Starfleet trained you well, but they trained you to fight a conventional war. You cannot win a conventional war against a cellular infection. Dan levels his phaser directly at the hologram. Drop the shields.
Now.
The hologram doesn't flinch. It slowly turns its static blurred head to look at Dan, then pans across the trapped pilots. I am not your enemy, Lieutenant O'Keefe. I am the cure, the figure says calmly. You have seen the calcified worlds. You have seen what my nanites can do. The hive assimilates to grow. I dissolve to cleanse. I have the weapon, and as you just witnessed, I now have the foundation for a fleet. You are utilizing assimilated Cardassian cruisers piloted by synthetic drones, Valak states, his Vulcan logic slicing through the rhetoric. Your methods violate the Federation Charter, the Khitomer Accords, and basic biological ethics. Ethics will not stop the host queens from gestating, the figure counters sharply. Admiral Quinn is a fool playing a game of chess, while the board is on fire. But you are the elite. You have seen the meat grinder. I have the ships, but synthetic drones lack the tactical intuition of organic pilots. They cannot improvise. They cannot fly a Valkyrie through a gravity eddy. The shadowed figure extends a digitized hand toward the cages. I am offering you a new commission. Leave Starfleet. Join my armada. You will command the spearhead that burns the hive out of this galaxy, root and stem. We will save the Federation, even if the Federation condemns us for it. The refusal. The silence in the room is absolute. Robert Saul is the first to speak. He spits on the deck plating. I grew up building Starfleet ships. We build them to explore, not to commit planetary genocide with microscopic bugs. You're out of your mind. Mel steps back from the edge of her force field, her eyes glaring at the projection. You're playing God with technology you can't control. I've seen what happens when Starfleet science goes rogue. It ruins lives. I'd rather take my chances in a dogfight. Jeklos simply crosses his massive green arms and growls. Mrak bares her fangs. Valak looks at the hologram, his expression perfectly stoic. The mathematical probability of your nanites maintaining their programming without mutation is infinitesimally small, Valak says. You are trading one apocalyptic variable for another. Gold Flight declines your offer. The shadowed figure lowers its hand. The static around its face seems to sigh. A predictable, but disappointing, calculation. You cling to a uniform that is already a shroud. The figure looks around the room one last time. I will not hold you here. You have nothing to fear from me, Gold Flight. You will never find me, and I will not target Federation assets. Tell your admiral to stay out of the shadows. The hive will be destroyed, and the galaxy will find peace again, whatever the cost. With a sharp snap, the holographic projection vanishes. A split second later, the blue force field cylinders hum down, dissipating into nothing. Mel stumbles forward as the field drops, catching herself on the console. Saul violently shakes the numbness out of his arms. Is everyone all right? Dan asks, keeping his phaser sweeping the dark corners of the lab. We are unharmed, Valak confirms, retrieving his dropped phaser rifle. He taps his comm badge. Valak to Gold 3. We are clear. Energize. Locking onto your signatures now, Commander. Welcome back, Anna says. The transporter beam catches them, pulling the 6 officers out of the Tartarus black site and back to the cold, cramped safety of their heavy flyers. The report. Location: briefing room, USS Liberty. Time: 4 hours later. The Liberty is at warp, putting as much distance between themselves and the Tartarus sector as possible. The holographic tactical table is glowing blue, displaying the face of Admiral Quinn. He looks exhausted. Valak has just finished playing the audio recording of the shadowed figure's pitch. A rogue armada, Quinn says quietly, rubbing his temples. Armed with weaponized Borg nanotech and stolen Hive capital ships. And they think they are the heroes of this story. They possess a profound tactical advantage, Admiral, Valak reports. However, their reliance on automated and synthetic systems makes their fleet mathematically predictable. They lack organic ingenuity. That's why he wanted us, Dan adds, leaning against the bulkhead. He's got the hammer, but he doesn't have the hands to swing it properly. We are officially fighting a 3-front war, Quinn sighs. The Hive wants to consume us. This rogue faction wants to burn the galaxy to save it. And Starfleet is caught right in the middle. Return to Starbase 12, Gold Flight. You've earned some shore leave. We need to reevaluate our entire strategic posture. The hologram fades out. The pilots of Gold Flight look at each other. They survived the trap, but the galaxy just got a whole lot more complicated. Season 5, Episode 6, Shore Leave and Sunburns. Location: Starbase 12, Sector 001 Perimeter. Time: 72 hours after the Tartarus Black Site. The USS Liberty limps into the massive, sprawling space dock of Starbase 12. The view out of the Liberty's observation deck is staggering. The station is buzzing with frantic, heavy industry. But it isn't just Starfleet Gray filling the dry docks. Massive, dark green hulls of Klingon Vorcha-class attack cruisers and Brel-class birds of prey surround the station, like a pack of hunting dogs. The Empire has officially mobilized to form a blockade line. While Valak, Admiral Quinn, and a contingent of loud, aggressive Klingon generals disappear into the upper echelon briefing rooms to discuss the horrifying reality of the host queens and the rogue armada, Gold Flight is handed a rare 24-hour pass. 24 hours of breathable air that doesn't smell like plasma coolant. Robert Saul sighs in relief, tossing his duffel bag onto his bunk in the transient officer's quarters. I say we find the nearest bar and drink until we forget what a bug looks like. Negative, Mrak purrs, stretching her arms above her head. A bar is dark and smells of stale synthahol. I require heat. Real heat. We are going to the holodeck. I have booked Program Pacifica for a private beach. A beach? Mel asks, freezing in the doorway of the quarters. The color completely drains from her face. Yeah, a beach. Jeklo rumbles, the massive Orion cracking his neck.
Sand.
Ocean. Drinks with little umbrellas in them. I'm in. Mel takes a step backward into the corridor. Actually, I think I'm going to pass. The Valkyrie's targeting sensors need a baseline recalibration, and Anna Shvetsov appears behind Mel, physically blocking her retreat. The icy human pilot is already holding a holodeck access key. Saul already ran the diagnostics, stew full. Anna says flatly. You've been vibrating like an overloaded EPS conduit since we left that ghost station. Unit cohesion dictates we decompress. You're coming to the beach. Lieutenant, I really don't. Dan steps out into the corridor, catching Mel's panicked eye. He knows exactly why she is terrified. Stripping down to swimwear in front of a squad of oblivious coworkers when you are trapped in a high-libido, hyper-attractive Deltan female body, but possess the mind of an Earth-born male, is a psychological minefield. Dan gives her a subtle, reassuring nod. Come on, Mel.
It'll be good for you.
You don't even have to swim. Just sit in the sun for an hour. Mel glares at Dan, a look that promises swift and terrible retribution, but she knows she can't refuse without drawing more suspicion. Fine, she mutters through gritted teeth. 1 hour. Program Pacifica 4. Location, holodeck 3. The heavy yellow doors of the holodeck slide open, instantly washing the crew in the sound of crashing waves, crying seagulls, and a blast of glorious, 80-degree tropical heat. The crew filters in from the changing anterooms. Jeklo strides out first, wearing massive, garish floral swim trunks, immediately cracking open a replicated coconut drink. Sol follows, already looking slightly sunburned, carrying a hover fridge full of Starfleet tissue lager. Anna walks out in a sleek, athletic two-piece swimsuit, looking completely at ease as she spreads a towel on the white sand. Mrak doesn't even bother with a towel. The Kaition simply finds the warmest patch of sand, drops into it, and stretches out like a massive house cat, soaking the artificial UV rays into her fur. Then, Mel steps out. She has utilized the holodeck's sartorial subroutines to their absolute limit. While the rest of the crew is in typical beachwear, Mel is wearing a long-sleeved, high-necked, heavy-duty surfer's rash guard and baggy board shorts that go past her knees. She has her arms crossed tightly over her chest, her posture rigid as a board. Sol pauses mid-sip, looking at her in confusion. Stuful, are you going deep-sea diving in an ice storm? It's 85 degrees out here. I burn easily, Mel snaps, her voice tight. You're a Deltan, Jeklo points out, scratching his green chin. I thought your species practically lived in the sun. I'm a sensitive Deltan, Mel bites back, stalking past them. She finds a spot under the largest, thickest palm tree she can find and practically collapses into the shade, pulling her knees to her chest. Dan walks out last, wearing standard trunks, and immediately clocks the tension. He grabs 2 cold lagers from Sol's cooler and jogs over to the palm tree, dropping down in the sand next to Mel. He hands her a bottle. You okay? He asks quietly. I am in hell, Dan, Mel whispers back, taking the bottle and pressing the cold glass against her forehead. The Deltan physiology is working entirely against her male brain. The heat, the artificial sunlight, and the pheromones of the relaxing crew are making her skin flush. Worse, from her vantage point in the shade, she has a clear view of Anna and Mrak. The male part of her brain, the core of who she is intensely attracted to women, making the situation deeply confusing and profoundly embarrassing. She feels like a creep in her own squad, forcing her to avert her eyes and stare angrily at the sand. Just breathe, Dan murmurs. Nobody knows. You're just a pilot taking a break in the shade. Drink your beer. The pheromones spike. Down by the water, Jeklo and Sol are throwing a hover disc back and forth. Sol misses a catch, and the disc skips across the sand, landing right near Mel's boots. Sol jogs up to grab it. He stops, looking down at Mel. Because of the extreme stress, Mel's Deltan biology is involuntarily spiking her pheromone output. It's a subtle, deeply intoxicating scent that registers on a subconscious level. Sol, completely oblivious to the science of it, just suddenly realizes he is staring at her. Despite the baggy, ridiculous rash guard, Mel is undeniably, objectively beautiful. You know, Stuful, Sol says, a slightly goofy, uncharacteristic smile spreading across his face as the pheromones hit him. Even bundled up like an Eskimo, you've got great eyes. You should come throw the disc with us. Loosen up a bit. Mel freezes. Absolute, blinding panic seizes her. A guy from Utopia Planitia is casually hitting on her, and her body is biologically programmed to respond to it, even though her brain is screaming in horror. I'm fine here, Sol, Mel stammers, her voice cracking slightly, her face turning bright red. Sol takes a step closer, completely missing the panic.
Come on.
Just a few throws. I bet you've got a great arm. Dan stands up smoothly, stepping directly between Sol and Mel. Actually, Sol, Mel and I were just going over the telemetry from the Tartarus Black site. Dan lies effortlessly, clapping the mechanic on the shoulder and gently turning him back toward the water. We're trying to figure out how those androids bypass the quarantine lockout. Give us a few minutes, yeah? Saul blinks, the spell broken as Dan physically blocks the pheromones.
Oh, right.
Yeah, sure thing, Lieutenant. Talk shop on the beach. Classic pilots. He jogs back to Jeklo. Dan sits back down. Mel lets out a breath she feels like she's been holding for 20 years. I owe you 1,000 credits, Mel whispers, rubbing her temples. If he had touched my arm, I think I would have punched him in the throat. He didn't mean anything by it. Dan chuckles softly, taking a swig of his beer. He's just a guy, Mel. And you? Well, you're putting off a vibe right now that's confusing the poor kid's sensors. It's not a vibe, it's biology, Mel groans, hiding her face in her hands. This body reacts to stress by trying to attract a mate. It's humiliating. I'm a grown man trapped in a biological honey trap. I can't do this, Dan. I can't be off duty. It's easier when the bugs are shooting at us. Hey, Dan says, his voice losing the joking tone, becoming grounded and firm. Look at me. Mel peers through her fingers. You're a pilot of Gold Flight, Dan says. You flew point against a Hive cruiser and didn't blink. You survived a black site. You can survive a beach day. You just have to stop fighting yourself for 5 minutes. If you want to sit in the shade and scowl at the ocean, do it. But own it. Mel looks at him. Then she looks out at the water. Anna is swimming, cutting through the waves with perfect form. Mrak is asleep. Jeklo and Saul are arguing about the hoverdisk rules. For the first time all day, Mel's shoulders drop a fraction of an inch. The pheromone spike slowly begins to dissipate. Okay, Mel breathes. Okay. Sitting and scowling. I can do that. There you go. Dan smiles, clinking his bottle against hers. The complication. Just as Mel finally takes a sip of her beer, the heavy yellow doors of the holodeck hiss open. The illusion of the private Pacifica beach is instantly shattered by the deafening, booming sound of Klingon laughter. 5 Klingon warriors, dressed in heavy leather armor and carrying massive mugs of blood wine, march into the holodeck. They stop at the edge of the sand, looking around at the bright sun and the Starfleet officers with absolute disdain. Computer, the lead Klingon barks, a massive, scarred warrior with a missing eye. Cancel this pathetic human illusion. Load program Klingon Combat Arena Sigma 9. Authorization. General Kvok. The beautiful beach instantly wavers. The sun flickers, replaced by the red, volcanic sky of Kionoas. The white sand turns into jagged, obsidian rock. Anna stops swimming and stands up in what is now a pool of boiling mud. Mrak leaps to her feet, her fur bristling a low, guttural hiss vibrating in her chest. Dan and Mel stand up. Hey! Jeklo rumbles, tossing the hoverdisk aside and marching toward the Klingon. We booked this room for the next 3 hours. Wait your turn, Ridgehead. The one-eyed Klingon laughs, a harsh, grating sound. He draws a massive, serrated DK Tog dagger from his belt. The Empire is here to fight your war for you, Starfleet. The Klingon sneers. We do not wait in line for our entertainment. If you want this room, fight us for it. The 4 other Klingon draw their blades, grinning maliciously at the unarmed Starfleet pilots. Dan looks at Mel. Mel looks down at her baggy board shorts, then back up at the massive Klingon warriors. A very slow, very dark smile spreads across her face. You know, Dan, Mel says, her voice dropping into its sharpest, most aggressive cadence. I was having a really terrible day. Dan grins, cracking his knuckles. I know. You want the big one. Oh, absolutely. The bar brawl. Take them. Kvok roars, lunging forward with his serrated blade. The boiling mud of the volcanic arena erupts as Gold Flight charges. There is no Starfleet protocol here. It is pure, unadulterated survival. Jeklo hits the first Klingon like a runaway freight train, the massive Orion tackling the warrior directly into a pool of sulfurous water. Mrak leaps, her claws extended, using the Klingon heavy armor against them by vaulting off their shoulders and striking at their unprotected necks. Dan and Saul tag team a massive warrior, trading brutal punches, but the Klingon fight dirty. Knees, headbutts, and pommel strikes batter the Starfleet pilots. Saul takes a backhand that splits his lip, and Dan is thrown hard into a jagged holographic rock. The dice roll, Gold Flight Brawling. Skill, 4D, average. Difficulty, high 20. Fighting armed, armored Klingon barehanded. Roll, 4, 3, 5, 1-13, failure/taking heavy damage. But the center of the storm is Mel. She isn't fighting like a Starfleet pilot. She is fighting with the pent-up, suffocating rage of a man trapped in a cage. She ducks under a wild swing from Kvok and drives her elbow right into his ribs with a sickening crack. The one-eyed Klingon snarls, completely abandoning any sense of honorable hand-to-hand combat. He slashes wildly with his DK Tog. Anna Shvetsov, fighting nearby, takes a glancing slash across her chest. The blade ruins her athletic swimsuit top, tearing the fabric completely. Anna doesn't even blink. With absolute, icy professionalism, she kicks her opponent in knee, steps back, and tightly crosses her arms over her chest to make herself decent, her face an unreadable mask of annoyance. But Kvok doesn't stop. He spins, his blade catching the thick material of Mel's heavy rash guard and baggy board shorts. He doesn't cut her flesh, but the serrated edge violently shreds the fabric. In an instant, the baggy, protective layers Mel was hiding behind fall away in tatters. She is left standing in the boiling mud, completely exposed in the remnants of her shredded clothes. For a fraction of a second, the holodeck freezes. For Mel, it is her absolute worst nightmare made manifest. The body she hates, the skin that feels like a prison, the intense Deltan physiology she is so deeply ashamed of, put on display in front of her entire squad and a room full of laughing enemies. Something inside her snaps. The feral rage. Mel, no. Dan yells, scrambling up from the rocks. Mel doesn't cover up. She doesn't shrink away. She lets out a raw, guttural scream of absolute fury, launching herself directly at Kvok. She ignores the blade entirely. She hits him so hard, she knocks the massive Klingon flat onto his back in the mud, pinning him down. She punches him, over and over and over. Her knuckles split against his ridged forehead, but she doesn't stop. The sheer, unrestrained violence of her breakdown is terrifying. Stuful, stand down. Jeklo yells, realizing she is going to beat the warrior to death. Jeklo and Dan rush in. The massive Orion grabs Mel around the waist, while Dan grabs her arms, physically hauling her off the bloody Klingon. Mel thrashes wildly, hyperventilating, tears of absolute rage and humiliation streaming down her face. The heavy holodeck doors slide open. Valak steps into the volcanic arena. The Vulcan commander takes in the scene, his battered crew, the bleeding Klingon, the boiling mud, and Mel screaming in Dan and Jeklo's arms. Computer. Freeze program. Valak orders flatly. The mud stops bubbling. The remaining Klingons slowly get to their feet, wiping blood from their mouths. Kvok staggers up, looking at Mel with his one good eye. He doesn't look angry. He looks profoundly impressed. Kvok slams his fist over his heart in a traditional Klingon salute. She fights like a wounded Targ. Kvok laughs, spitting blood onto the gride floor of the frozen holodeck. Your squad has honor, Starfleet. The room is yours. The Klingon march past Valak and out into the corridor. The breakdown. The adrenaline instantly crashes. With the fight over, the terrible reality of the exposure hits Mel like a physical weight. Her legs give out. Dan catches her, immediately stripping off his own uniform jacket he had left by the door and wrapping it tightly around her trembling shoulders. Mel is sobbing uncontrollably, her chest heaving as a massive Deltan stress pheromone spike fills the room. It's a total psychological collapse. Get her up, Anna says, her voice losing its usual ice, replaced by urgent concern as she holds a towel over her own ruined top. She's in shock. Her pulse is going crazy. Sickbay. Now Dan orders. Valak steps aside, allowing the battered, limping members of Gold Flight to carry their wingmen out of the holodeck. The truth revealed. Location: Starbase 12, main sickbay. Time: 20 minutes later. Gold Flight is clustered in a private medical bay. Jeklo is holding an ice pack to his jaw. Saul is getting his split lip sealed with a dermal regenerator. Anna has changed into standard Starfleet fatigues. Mel is lying on a bio bed, wrapped in a thermal blanket, staring blankly at the ceiling. She is exhausted, completely drained. Dan stands right next to the bed, acting as a physical barrier between her and the rest of the room. The chief medical officer, a harried-looking Andorian, is scanning Mel with a medical tricorder. His antennae flatten in concern as he reads the scrolling data. Her neurochemical pathways are dangerously overloaded, the doctor murmurs, tapping his PADD. The physiological stress from the brawl triggered a massive deltan pheromonal cascade, but her brain is trying to forcefully suppress it. It's tearing her nervous system apart. I need to synthesize a neural calmative immediately. Then do it, Doc, Jeklo grunts. Whatever she needs. It is not that simple, Ensign, the doctor sighs, oblivious to the fact that he is not speaking privately. He looks up from the chart. Standard Deltan sedatives are calibrated for a Deltan cerebral cortex. If I give her a standard dose, the human male neurological architecture grafted to her brain stem will reject it. It could cause a localized stroke. The room goes completely, terrifyingly silent. Saul stops wiping the blood off his chin. Anna slowly lowers her arms. Mrak's ears twitch. Doc, Saul says slowly, looking from the Andorian to Mel. What did you just say? The doctor blinks, looking around at the confused faces of Gold Flight. He realizes his breach of protocol a second too late. Her medical file is highly classified. I assumed as her flight wing, you were briefed on the USS Tsiolkovsky transporter accident. Mel closes her eyes. A single tear rolls down her cheek. The secret is out. The walls have completely fallen down. A human male brain. Anna whispers, the pieces instantly clicking together in her tactical mind. The baggy clothes. The absolute horror at the beach. The way she fought. The way she talked. Stufel, you're a guy. Mel doesn't answer. She just pulls the thermal blanket tighter around her neck, wishing the deck plating would open up and swallow her into the vacuum of space. Dan looks at the rest of the squad, his jaw set, ready to defend his co-pilot against whatever comes next. But no one laughs. No one looks at her with disgust. Jeklo, the massive, rough-around-the-edges Orion, steps closer to the bio bed. He looks down at Mel, his heavy brow furrowed in deep, sudden understanding. That's why you were so miserable on the beach, Jeklo says softly. His deep voice is entirely devoid of mockery. You were trapped. Saul looks down at his boots, suddenly realizing why his pheromone-induced flirting earlier had caused Mel such blinding panic. Stufel. Mel? Man, I am so sorry about earlier. I didn't know. None of us knew. Mrak steps up next to Dan. The Kytion Predator looks down at the terrified pilot. A warrior's spirit is not defined by the shell it wears. Mrak purrs, her voice carrying a rare, profound respect. You fought the one-eyed Klingon with the fury of a caged beast. You defended your honor. That is all that matters to the pack. Anna Shvetsov walks over and rests a hand gently on the edge of the bio bed. We don't care about the file, Stufel, Anna says, her icy demeanor melting into absolute, rock-solid loyalty. Your Gold Flight. You fly with us. You bleed with us. Anyone outside this room asks questions, they deal with me. Understood. Mel opens her eyes. She looks at the faces of her squad. For the first time since the accident, she isn't looking at strangers judging a freak. She is looking at her crew. Understood, Mel whispers, her voice cracking. Valak, who has been standing silently by the door observing the emotional exchange, finally steps forward.
Doctor.
Synthesize a customized calmative based on human tolerances, Valak orders. His Vulcan tone is steady, comforting anchor in the chaotic room. When Ensign Stufel is stabilized, Gold Flight will return to quarters. The Khitomer Accords dictate we must coordinate with the Klingon Empire by, 800 hours. We have a war to win. Gemini said Season 5, Episode 7, blood and pulse fire. Location: Joint Briefing Room, Starbase 12. Time: 1 week later. The atmosphere in the briefing room is thick with tension and the smell of dark Klingon Raktajino. At the head of the holographic tactical table stands Admiral Quinn, looking more exhausted than ever. Beside him is General Kvok, the massive, one-eyed Klingon warrior that Mel beat into the holodeck mud 7 days ago. Kvok has a fresh, jagged scar across his forehead, and he looks incredibly pleased about it. Sitting around the table are the 8 pilots of Gold Flight. The dynamic among them has subtly, beautifully shifted. Mel isn't sitting rigidly on the edge of her seat anymore. She is leaning back, her boots propped on the lower rung of her chair, comfortably wedged between Dan and Jeklo. The secret is out, the crushing weight of the lie is gone, and her squad has formed an impenetrable wall of loyalty around her. The intelligence from the Tartarus Black Site has been fully verified. Admiral Quinn begins, bringing up a rotating DNA schematic on the holotable. Starfleet Medical and the Daystrom Institute have successfully reverse-engineered the rogue scientists' nanites. We have the capability to mass-produce the exact same localized, hive-eating weapon. Robert Saul crosses his arms. So we load them into the torpedo tubes and go bug hunting, right? It is not that simple, Ensign. Valak replies evenly. The Federation Council and the Klingon High Council are currently locked in a fierce ethical debate. Releasing self-replicating synthetic machines, even with a programmed kill switch, is technically a violation of the Khitomer Accords regarding weaponized xenocide. General Kvok slams his massive fist onto the table, rattling the coffee mugs. Cowards and politicians. Kvok roars, his one good eye blazing. While old men in comfortable chairs debate the honor of killing a parasite, the Hive is gestating host queens on 100 worlds. The Empire will not wait for permission to bleed our enemies. We go on the offensive.
System by system.
We will burn what is left of the Hive before the rogue synthetic armada steals all our glory. Kvok turns his gaze away from Quinn and looks directly at Gold Flight. His eye lands on Mel. A terrifying, toothy grin spreads across the Klingon general's face. I have requested the USS Liberty join my vanguard, Kvok says, his voice dropping to a gravelly purr. Because Starfleet pilots are usually soft. But Gold Flight, you have a warrior spirit. Specifically, the Deltan. Mel blinks, caught off guard. Me? You fight with the unrestrained, glorious fury of a cornered beast. Kvok booms, laughing. He reaches down and slides a heavy, ornate, leather-wrapped box across the table toward her.
A gift.
For the blood you drew on the holodeck. You are small, but your rage is immense. The Empire respects this. Mel opens the box. Inside is a perfectly balanced, razor-sharp Klingon DK Tog dagger. The hilt is carved from bone. Jeklo whistles low. Anna Shvetsov raises an impressed eyebrow. Dan nudges Mel's shoulder with a grin. Mel looks from the dagger to the massive Klingon general. She doesn't blush and she doesn't panic. The male mind inside her absolutely loves the weapon. She pulls the heavy dagger from the box, expertly flipping it in her hand to test the weight, before slamming it point down into the table with a loud thwack. I'll put it to good use, General, Mel says, flashing a sharp, genuine smile. Kvok roars with laughter. We launch in 1 hour. Prepare your ships. The offensive. Location: the Calandra Sector. Time: 48 hours into the deployment. The Joint Strike Force drops out of warp in the Calandra Sector, a dense, asteroid-heavy region of space that Starfleet intelligence flagged as a Hive processing hub. Leading the charge is Kvok's massive Vorcha-class attack cruiser, the IKS Vengeance. Flanking the cruiser are 12 Brel-class birds of prey, their cloaking devices disengaged, so they can run with their shields fully hot. And flying right in the middle of the Klingon formation are the 4 heavy Valkyrie tactical flyers of Gold Flight. Sensors are picking up heavy bioresin concentrations in the asteroid field ahead. Martel reports from the co-pilot seat of Gold 2, his blue hands flying over the console. I'm reading a Hive refining station anchored to a Class D planetoid, surrounded by a swarm of interceptors. Finally, Mrak hisses from the pilot's seat, her Kytion tail lashing. The waiting was making me dull. Listen to me, Starfleet. General Kvaka's voice echoes over the joint tactical net. The birds of prey will form the vanguard. We will dive into the asteroid field and scatter the swarm. Gold Flight, you are the heavy artillery. When we clear the interceptors, you will use your pulse cannons to crack the refining station's armor. Inside Gold 1, Valak processes the tactical geometry. General Kvak, logic dictates a coordinated, synchronized approach. The Hive operates with a collective mind. If your Brels charge erratically, the Hive will simply bracket your flight paths and isolate you. Logic is for Vulcan's commander. Kvak laughs, the sound of disruptor banks charging humming in the background. Victory is for Klingon. Attack. The 12 birds of prey instantly break formation. They don't fly in squadrons. They fly like a pack of starving wolves, diving recklessly into the dense asteroid field at maximum impulse. The chaos of battle. So much for unit cohesion. Anna Shvetsov deadpants over the comms from Gold 3. The Hive responds instantly. The dark, amber-glowing shapes of dozens of mutated interceptors detach from the refining station and swarm into the asteroid field. The battle is a chaotic, brutal furball. The Klingon Brels are highly maneuverable, spinning and weaving through the floating rocks, firing bright green disruptor blasts at point-blank range. But Valak was right. The hive mind doesn't panic. It calculates. Inside Gold 4, Mel is tracking the telemetry on her tactical board. Dan, the bugs are setting a trap, Mel warns, her fingers dancing over the keys. The Klingon are chasing the fast interceptors, but the Hive is moving heavy assault drones behind the asteroids to flank them. They're boxing Kvaka's fighters in. Valak, you seeing this? Dan calls out, keeping the heavy Valkyrie in a stable holding pattern just outside the densest part of the field. I see it, Lieutenant, Valak replies calmly. The Klingon vanguard is about to be mathematically overwhelmed. We must intervene. Gold Flight is sitting in their heavy, four-ship diamond formation. They have massive forward shields, devastating pulse cannons, and micro-torpedoes. But they are flying into an absolute meat grinder of crossfire between the reckless Klingon and the calculated hive swarm. Gemini said, Gold Flight, form the anvil. Valak's voice cuts through the chaotic comms traffic, cold and precise. Do not enter the asteroid field. We will hold the perimeter. Establish a firing line and synchronize targeting telemetry. We will shatter the Hive's flanking maneuver before the trap closes. Inside Gold 4, Mel's fingers fly across the tactical console. The tension that used to knot her shoulders is completely gone. She is entirely in her element. I'm linking our sensor arrays with Gold 1, Mel says, her eyes darting across the glowing green readouts. Dan, angle us 10 degrees port. The Hive is using the ambient radiation of the larger asteroids to mask their heavy drones. I'm going to paint them. You paint him, I'll hold us steady, Dan confirms, locking the flight yoke and bringing the massive forward pulse cannons to bear. In Gold 1, Robert Saul is sweating, bypassing the safety limiters on the long-range scanners to cut through the interference. Telemetry received, stew full. I've got a lock on 6 heavy assault drones creeping up behind Kvaka's vanguard. They're about to box the Klingon in. Target locks confirmed, Valak states smoothly. Gold Flight. Fire for effect. The dice roll, Mel and Saul. Gunnery/sensors synergy. Skill. 6D, combined tactical and sensors. Difficulty. High, 20. Threading heavy pulse cannon fire through a dense, moving asteroid field from maximum range. Roll. 5, 6, 4, 5. 5, 6 wild. Dash, reroll wild die dash, 3. Total, 5 plus 6 plus 4 plus 5 plus 5 plus 6 plus 3 is equal to 34, devastating precision. The sniper's line. The 4 Valkyrie-class heavy flyers sit perfectly still on the edge of the Calandra sector's asteroid field, forming an impregnable wall of Starfleet duranium. In perfect unison, their massive forward pulse cannons erupt. The heavy, concentrated beams of superheated Starfleet plasma don't spray wildly, like the Klingon disruptors. They punch through the void like surgical scalpels. The beams thread the needle between massive, spinning asteroids, bypassing the chaotic dogfight entirely. Deep inside the asteroid field, a heavy Hive assault drone slides out from behind a massive rock, its amber weapons charging to shoot a Klingon Brel in the back. Before it can fire, Mel's pulse cannon beam takes it squarely in the center of mass. The drone instantly detonates in a blinding flash of green bioresin and shattered armor. A second later, Anna Shvetsov vaporizes another drone. Then Rak. Then Valak. Within 15 seconds, the 4 Starfleet flyers systematically assassinate the entire Hive flanking force from maximum range. The trap is shattered before General Kvok even realizes he was in danger. Deprived of their heavy support, the remaining Hive interceptors are quickly torn to pieces by the furious, close-quarters brawling of the Klingon vanguard. The asteroid field is suddenly littered with the glowing, burning wreckage of the swarm. Ha! General Kvok's booming laugh echoes over the joint frequency. Good shooting, Starfleet. You fight like snipers, but your weapons strike like hammers. The swarm is broken. The interceptors were merely a screen, General. Valak replies, his eyes fixed on the massive, dark shape looming behind the asteroid field. The primary objective remains heavily fortified. The refining station. The Klingon birds of prey regroup, falling in alongside Goldflight as the Joint Strike Force approaches the Hive refining station. It is a terrifying structure. Anchored to a barren, Class D planetoid, the station looks like a massive, mutated tick. Millions of tons of raw, glowing amber bioresin pulse through thick, fleshy conduits, feeding a central processing core that is heavily shielded by thick layers of calcified organic armor. Sensors are reading extreme localized shielding around that core, Saul reports, reading the scans from Gold One. Commander, our pulse cannons won't scratch that armor from a distance. And Kvok's disruptors will just bounce off. General Kvok's face appears on the Valkyrie's comm screens. He wipes a smear of green Hive blood off his armor. He must have taken a console spark during the dogfight. My birds of prey will lay down a continuous barrage to keep their defensive turrets occupied. Kvok barks. Goldflight, you are the heavy hitters. You must find a way to crack that shell, so we can burn the resin pools. Inside Gold One, Valak reaches beneath his command console. He enters a highly classified, 12-digit Starfleet intelligence decryption code. A hidden compartment slides open. Inside the compartment rests a single, sleek black data drive and a physical keycard. Valak looks at Saul. Ensign Saul. Before we launched from Starbase 12, Admiral Quinn authorized the installation of a single, experimental Class 8 quantum torpedo into Gold One's ventral tube. Saul's eyes widen. The nanites? Commander, the Council is still debating. The Council is debating mass deployment. Valak corrects him smoothly. Admiral Quinn authorized a field test. The torpedo in our bay contains a replicated, localized swarm of the Tartarus nanites, equipped with the stasis leash. We have the weapon that can instantly dissolve that station. In Gold 4, Mel hears this over the secure squad channel. Her stomach drops. The memory of the dead, calcified ghost worlds flashes through her mind. The weapon is clean, efficient, and horrifyingly absolute. Commander, Mel says, her voice tight but steady. If we fire that torpedo, we're crossing a line. We're using a self-replicating synthetic weapon. If the stasis leash fails, or if the Hive figures out how to adapt to it while it's eating their station, we could hand them the very weapon that destroys us. A logical concern, Ensign. Valak agrees. Which is why I leave the tactical decision to Goldflight. We are the ones pulling the trigger. Gemini said. Leave the torpedo in the tube, Valak orders, his voice carrying the absolute, uncompromising weight of a Starfleet commander. If we deploy the nanites, we risk the Hive adapting to them. We will execute a localized trench run through the primary bioconduits. We crack the armor manually. Goldflight, lock S-foils. Follow me. Inside Gold 4, Mel lets out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. Good call, Commander. Dan, throttle up. Let's go thread the needle. You heard the boss, Dan says, shoving the flight yoke forward. Kvok, keep those turrets busy. We're going in the front door. Kapla, Starfleet. Die well. Kvok roars over the comms, his Vorcha cruiser opening up with a blinding barrage of heavy disruptor fire against the station's upper shields. The trench run. The 4 Valkyrie-class heavy flyers dive toward the massive, tick-like refining station. They slip below the primary deflector grid, dropping into a deep, jagged trench formed by 2 massive, pulsing conduits of raw bioresin. The trench is a nightmare. Amber disruptor turrets track them from the canyon walls. The space is so tight that the heavy Starfleet flyers have mere meters of clearance on either side, diverting all power to forward deflectors. Robert Saul yells in Gold 1, the cockpit violently shaking as glancing disruptor bolts strike their shields. Stay in the groove. Anna Shvetsov commands from Gold 3, her Valkyrie weaving through the incoming fire with mechanical precision. Target the thermal exhaust vents at the end of the conduit. The dice roll, Gold Flight, piloting/gunnery. Skill, 5D, average flight skill. Difficulty, heroic, 25, navigating a heavily fortified, claustrophobic trench at maximum impulse. Roll, 3, 2, 4, 1, 1 wild. Critical complication, -11, catastrophic failure/heavy damage. The Hive's automated defenses are simply too dense. The collective mind anticipates their flight path perfectly. A hidden, heavy-duty disruptor emplacement rises from the floor of the trench directly in front of Gold 2. Ambush.
Pull up.
Mel screams over the tactical net. Mrak snarls, hauling her flight stick back with all her Kytion strength, but the heavy flyer is too sluggish in the narrow trench. The disruptor turret fires a point-blank, massive burst of amber plasma. The shot strips Gold 2's forward deflectors instantly and impacts directly against the right side of the cockpit canopy. The duranium hull buckles. The reinforced transparent aluminum shatters inward. A localized explosion rips through the right side of Gold 2's cockpit. The tactical console in front of Ensign Mottel violently overloads, blowing a shower of superheated shrapnel and plasma directly into the Balian's face. Ag. Mottel's scream tears through the open comms channel, absolute agony cutting over the roar of the engines. Mottel. Mrak roars. The Kytion pilot ignores the incoming fire, her predatory instincts entirely overridden by the desperate need to protect her pack. She reaches across the cockpit, physically shielding the thrashing, badly burned Balian with her own body as she blindly flies the crippled Valkyrie up and out of the trench, trailing a massive plume of black smoke. The last resort. Gold 2 is out of the formation. They are venting atmosphere. Dan shouts, fighting his own yoke as Gold 4 takes a punishing hit to the port nacelle. The armor is too thick, Valak. The standard quantum torpedoes aren't penetrating. Down in the trench, Gold 1 and Gold 3 unleash a volley of standard Starfleet torpedoes directly into the thermal exhaust ports. The explosions are massive, but as the smoke clears, the horrifying truth is revealed. The Hive's calcified organic armor didn't just absorb the blast. It is rapidly secreting fresh bioresin to heal the scorch marks. The station is entirely intact, and its central processing core begins to glow with blinding, sickly white light. Commander, Saul gasps, his console flashing with critical warnings. They're charging a localized subspace pulse. If they fire that, it'll vaporize us and the Klingon vanguard. Valak stares at the tactical display. The mathematical probability of conventional victory has officially reached 0. Logic dictates only one remaining path. Ensign Saul, Valak says, his voice dropping into a chilling, absolute calm. Arm the payload in the ventral tube. Override the safety interlocks. Saul freezes for a fraction of a second, looking at the glowing red button on his console. He hears Mottel still screaming in agony over the open comms. He slams his fist down on the arming stud. Payload armed. Tube is hot. Saul yells. Gold flight.
Break off and ascend.
Maximum impulse. Valak orders. As Gold 3 and Gold 4 pull out of the trench, Gold 1 dives straight toward the glowing, charging central core of the Hive station. Valak doesn't blink. He presses the firing stud. The sleek, Black, unmarked class, 8 torpedo streaks from the ventral tube. It doesn't impact with a massive explosion. It hits the thick bioresin armor and simply cracks open. A faint, pale mist of stasis aerosol vents into the vacuum of space. Pull up, Commander.
Pull up.
Saul screams as Valak jerks the Valkyrie into a punishing vertical climb, barely clearing the station's highest spire. The Devouring. From a safe distance, Gold Flight and the Klingon Vanguard watch. For 3 seconds, nothing happens. Then, the Nanites wake up. There is no fire. There is no shockwave. It is entirely, terrifyingly silent. The massive, tick-like refining station simply begins to dissolve. The glowing amber bioresin turns instantly to gray, calcified ash, crumbling into the void. The heavy, armored bulkheads rot away as if subjected to 1,000,000 years of accelerated decay. The hive's massive subspace pulse weapon stutters, misfires, and dies as the Nanites devour its organic circuitry. In less than 45 seconds, the massive hive stronghold is reduced to a floating cloud of inert, gray dust. The weapon is absolute, and the hive mind, silenced so rapidly, never even has a microsecond to compute the molecular structure of what is killing them. They never learn how to counter it. The secret is safe, but the ethical line has been crossed.
The toe.
Gold 2 respond. Mel calls out frantically over the comms. I have him. Mraka's voice comes back. It is ragged, heavy with exertion, and stripped of all its usual playful mockery. He is unconscious. The console, it took his right eye. The burns are severe. I have engaged the emergency atmospheric force field, but we have lost primary thrusters. I've got you, Gold 2, Dan says, maneuvering Gold 4 carefully behind the smoking, drifting Valkyrie. Locking tractor beam now. Just hold him together, Mrak. We're going home. General Kvok's Vorcha cruiser pulls alongside the battered Starfleet flyers. A terrifying weapon, Commander Valak, Kvok says, his voice uncharacteristically subdued as he looks at the cloud of gray dust on his view screen. It lacks honor, but it is undeniably effective. The Empire will escort you to Starbase 12. C tier wounded. The aftermath. Location: Surgical Ward, Starbase 12. Time: 14 hours later. The waiting room outside the surgical suite is dead silent. Jeklo is pacing, his heavy boots thudding against the deck. Anna is staring blankly at a wall monitor. Dan and Mel are sitting close together on a bench. Mel hasn't said a word since they landed. The horror of seeing the Nanites deployed and the brutal reality of what happened to Martel is weighing heavily on her. The doors hiss open. The Andorian chief medical officer steps out, looking exhausted. Mrak is the first one on her feet. The Tsytian's uniform is still stained with Balian blue blood. The farmer. Does he live? He lives, Lieutenant, the doctor says softly. We managed to stabilize his neural pathways. But the plasma burns were catastrophic. We could not save the right side of his face or his optical nerve. Saul runs a hand over his face. So, what does that mean, Doc? It means Ensign Martel requires extensive cybernetic reconstruction, the doctor explains. A cortical implant to replace the eye and synthetic dermal plating across his right cheek and jaw. He will survive, and he will fly again. But he will never look the same. Valak steps forward from the shadows of the corridor. You have performed adequately, Doctor. We will see him now. Gemini said Season 5, Episode 8. The Scars We Wear. Location: Main Sickbay, Starbase 12. Time: 3 days later. The soft hum of the biobed is the only sound in the private recovery ward. Ensign Martel sits up. His hands, still stained faintly with the grease of the Valkyrie's engine bay, tremble slightly as he reaches up to touch his face. The right side of his blue, ridged Balian features is gone. In its place is a sleek, seamless plate of Starfleet tissue duranium alloy that runs from his jawline up to his temple. Where his right eye used to be, a highly advanced cybernetic optical sensor glows with a faint, pulsing red light. Mrak stands in the corner of the room. The Kytion pilot is perfectly still, her tail wrapped tightly around her leg. She hasn't slept in 3 days. It feels heavy, Mottel whispers, his voice carrying a slight metallic reverberation from the synthetic vocal cord bypass. The alloy is dense and sine, Valak says, standing at the foot of the bed. The Vulcan commander's hands are clasped behind his back. However, the optical implant interfaces directly with the Valkyrie's tactical telemetry. Your processing speed for target acquisition has mathematically increased by 14%. You are a more efficient weapons officer. Mottel looks at his reflection in the dark glass of a dormant medical monitor. He looks like a Borg drone. He looks like a monster. I should not have pulled up, Mrak suddenly hisses, her voice thick with self-loathing. She steps forward, her ears flattened. I broke formation. I exposed the flank. The pack suffered because of my fear. Mottel turns his cybernetic eye toward her. The lens whirs softly, adjusting focus. You didn't break formation out of fear, Lieutenant, Mottel says softly. You pulled up to shield me from the console explosion. I'm a farmer, Mrak. I know what a protective instinct looks like. You saved my life. Mrak looks away, her jaw tight, unable to meet his half-mechanical gaze. Your physiological parameters are stable, Ensign, Valak states, breaking the heavy emotional tension with pure logic. You are cleared for active duty. The rest of Gold Flight is waiting for you. The promenade, armor and attitude. Location, civilian promenade, Starbase 12. While Mottel is being discharged, Mel Stoufel is standing outside a high-end civilian clothing boutique on the station's massive promenade. She is wearing her off-duty clothes, the baggiest, most shapeless gray Starfleet sweatpants and an oversized hoodie she could find. She has the hood pulled up, trying desperately to become invisible in the bustling crowd of Federation citizens, Klingon warriors, and alien merchants. Stop slouching. Lieutenant Anna Shvetsov appears beside her, holding 2 cups of black coffee. Anna is wearing sleek, perfectly tailored civilian clothes, dark trousers, a fitted leather jacket, and boots. She looks sharp, dangerous, and completely comfortable in her own skin. I'm not slouching, Mel mutters, shrinking deeper into the hoodie. I'm maintaining a low tactical profile. You look like a fugitive, Anna replies flatly, handing her a coffee. Stoufel, the whole squad knows the truth now. You don't have to hide in the dark anymore. But you can't walk around a starbase looking like you're terrified of your own shadow. It draws more attention than just owning it. Anna, you don't understand. Mel sighs, leaning against the bulkhead. This body, the Deltan pheromones, the way people look at me. My brain is a guy from Earth. Every time someone stares, I feel like I'm wearing a costume I can't take off. It feels wrong. Anna takes a slow sip of her coffee, her icy blue eyes scanning the crowd. I don't know what it's like to have your mind put into the wrong body, Anna says candidly, not offering empty platitudes. But I know what it's like to be stared at in a hangar full of hotshot pilots. You think I wear the Ice Queen routine for fun? It's armor, Mel. Anna turns to face her wingman directly. You can't change the biology, but you can change the narrative, Anna says. Right now, you're letting the body dictate how you feel. Take the power back. Dress how you want to dress. Move how you want to move. If people stare because you're a beautiful Deltan, let them stare. But make sure they're looking at a Starfleet pilot who could shoot them out of the sky blindfolded. Confidence is a weapon. Learn how to wield it. Anna gestures toward the boutique. Now, we're going in there. We're going to find you clothes that actually fit, that don't make you look like a tent, and that make you feel like you. And if anyone gives you a weird look, I will personally break their jaw. Mel looks at the icy, fiercely loyal lieutenant. A small, genuine smile breaks through the anxiety. Okay, Mel breathes, pushing the hood back off her head. Lead the way. The hangar deck. Back to work. Location, Hangar Bay 4, Starbase 12. Mottel walks onto the hangar deck. He keeps his head down, acutely aware of the sleek duranium plating on his face. He expects the deck crews to stop and stare. He expects whispers. But Starfleet is an incredibly vast, diverse society. To the deck chiefs, a Balian with a cybernetic face is just another Tuesday. A few officers give him a respectful nod, but no one stops to gawk. He walks over to where Gold 2 is clamped to the deck. Jeklo, Sol, and Dan are standing around the Valkyrie's exposed starboard impulse manifold. There he is, Dan calls out, waving a plasma spanner in the air. Martel stops, bracing himself for the awkwardness. Hey guys. Jeklo, the massive Orion, walks over. He doesn't offer a gentle, pitying hug. He claps Martel heavily on the shoulder, nearly knocking the Balian over. Looking sharp, farmer. That duranium plating is a lot tougher than the old blue skin. You're practically an armored vehicle now. Yeah, well, Martel touches the metal plate awkwardly. The doctor said it might take some getting used to. Forget the doctor, Robert Sol says, wiping grease off his hands. He walks over and points a diagnostic tricorder right at Martel's glowing red eye. Valak said your new optical sensor has a direct interface with Starfleet telemetry. Can you read infrared? Martel blinks his cybernetic eye. The lens whirs. Suddenly, the hangar deck is overlaid with brilliant thermal heat signatures. Yeah. Actually, I can. Sol grins widely. Perfect. I dropped a microcaliper down in the primary EPS conduit an hour ago, and I can't find the damn thing. Get over here and look down this pipe. You're basically a walking tricorder now, Martel. You're going to save me hours of maintenance. Martel lets out a short, genuine laugh. The metallic reverberation in his voice doesn't even faze them. They aren't treating him like a broken victim. They are treating him like their co-pilot. They are treating him like Gold Flight. All right, Sol, Martel says, walking over to the engine block. Let's find your wrench. The Convergence. Location, the Officers' Lounge, Starbase 12. Time, 1900 hours. The lounge is packed with Starfleet and Klingon officers. Gold Flight has commandeered a large circular booth in the back. Dan, Jeklo, Sol, and Martel are already seated, a pitcher of synthahol and several plates of hot food between them. Mrak is sitting next to Martel. She is still quiet, but her tail is resting gently against the back of his chair, a subtle, Kaitian gesture of pack solidarity. The lounge doors slide open. Mel walks in, with Anna right behind her. Mel isn't wearing the baggy Starfleet sweatpants, and she isn't wearing the retro miniskirt uniform she hates. She is wearing a pair of dark, tailored civilian trousers, heavy combat boots, and a sleek, high-collared jacket left open over a simple gray undershirt. It is a perfect compromise. It doesn't hide her figure, but it completely abandons the hyper-feminized Deltan aesthetic she was forced into. It looks tough. It looks practical. It looks like the kind of clothes a hotshot pilot who grew up turning wrenches on Earth would wear. As she walks through the bar, a few Klingon officers turn to look at her, drawn by the natural Deltan allure. Instead of looking at the floor, Mel pulls her shoulders back. She remembers Anna's advice. You own a room. She meets the gaze of a massive Klingon warrior and gives him a sharp, challenging nod. The Klingon smirks, respectful, and turns back to his drink. Mel walks over to the booth and slides in next to Dan. Look who finally decided to join the land of the living. Dan grins, pouring her a glass of synthahol. Nice jacket.
You look good, Mel.
Thanks, Dan. Mel says, and for the first time in a very long time, it actually feels true. She looks around the table. Martel is laughing at a terrible joke Jeklo just told, his cybernetic eye pulsing warmly in the dim light of the bar. Anna is calmly sipping her drink, giving Mel a subtle, approving wink. Mrak is tearing into a massive plate of replicated raw meat. Valak sits at the edge of the booth, quietly reading a PADD, observing his crew with silent, logical satisfaction. They are a collection of scars, secrets, and broken pieces. But sitting here together, the weight of the galaxy feels manageable. Mel raises her glass. To Gold Flight. The squad raises their glasses, clinking them together over the center of the table. To Gold Flight. Gemini said Season 5, Episode 9. The Evolution of the Hammer. Location: Outpost 42, Federation border. Time: 0400 hours. The USS Liberty is at red alert. Distress beacon is active. Vrai's voice echoes over the hangar deck comms. Outpost 42 is a small, Class 3 orbital drydock, mostly used for decommissioning obsolete starships and repairing civilian freighters. Long-range sensors show a single warp signature intercepted the station 10 minutes ago. Profile matches the rogue synthetic armada. Down on the deck, the 8 pilots of Gold Flight sprint for their heavy Valkyrie flyers. Martel runs alongside Mrak, his new duranium facial plating catching the flashing red emergency lights. He doesn't stumble. His cybernetic eye is already whirring, downloading the outpost's schematics directly into his optic nerve before he even reaches the cockpit. Mel vaults up the ramp of Gold 4, wearing her new tailored civilian-style jacket over her uniform. She feels lighter, faster. The suffocating anxiety that used to plague her pre-flight checks is gone. She drops into the co-pilot seat next to Dan and instantly brings the weapons online. "Let's go save some engineers," Dan says, punching the thrusters. The silent dry dock. Location: Outpost 42. The 4 Valkyries drop out of warp perfectly synchronized, coming in hot over the small orbital dry dock. Target locks engaged, Mel reports, her fingers dancing over the tactical console.
Wait.
Dan, I'm not seeing any hive debris. I'm not seeing any combat debris at all. Through the forward canopy, the station looks completely intact. Moored to the primary docking pylon is a single, ancient Starfleet vessel, a Centaur-class destroyer, a relic from the Dominion War that was slated for the scrap heap. Its warp core is online. "I am reading no hull breaches," Martel's synthetically modulated voice reports from Gold 2. "Life support is nominal. I am tracking 42 Starfleet biological signatures. They are all clustered in a single module on Deck 4. A hostage situation," Robert Saul mutters from Gold 1. "Gold 3 and 4 maintain combat air patrol," Valak orders. "If that Centaur class attempts to break orbit, disable its engines. Gold 1 and 2 we are boarding. Set phasers to heavy stun. We do not know what the synthetic drones are capable of." The cafeteria prison. Valak, Saul, Mrak, and Martel touch down on the external landing pads and blow the outer airlock. They move through the station's corridors with practiced, lethal precision. Mrak takes the point, her phaser rifle raised, sniffing the air. Martel walks behind her, his red optic sensor painting the duranium bulkheads with thermal imaging. "No synthetic signatures in the administrative ring," Martel reports. "The biologicals are just ahead." They reach the heavy doors of the station's primary mess hall. The doors are locked from the outside by a thick, physical duranium bar that has been welded into the bulkhead. "Stand back," Saul says, firing up his heavy plasma cutter and slicing through the weld. Jeklo kicks the doors open. The boarding party sweeps into the room, weapons raised. "Starfleet, get down," Saul yells. But there is no screaming. There is no panic. The 42 Starfleet engineers and dry dock workers are sitting at the cafeteria tables. They look incredibly bored. A few of them are playing cards. The replicators are humming, churning out fresh coffee and sandwiches. The chief engineer, a gruff Tellarite, looks up from his poker hand and sighs. "Took you long enough," the Tellarite grunts. "You guys want some coffee? We've been locked in here for 2 hours. Valak lowers his rifle a fraction of an inch. "You were not harmed by the boarding party?" "Harmed? No," the chief says, standing up. 5 minutes after they docked, they sliced the main computer, locked down the command codes, and marched us all in here. Told us the station was being requisitioned for vital manufacturing. Then they welded the door shut and turned the replicators on freevent. "They did not attempt to execute you?" Saul asks, thoroughly confused. "They didn't try to vent the atmosphere?" "I just told you they gave us sandwiches," the chief snaps. "They're down in the heavy industrial fabrication bay. Whatever they're doing, they're draining the station's main reactor to do it." The evolution. Valak leaves the engineers in the mess hall and leads his strike team down to the industrial levels. As they approach the heavy fabrication bay, the deck plating vibrates with the massive, concussive thuds of heavy machinery operating at triple its safety limits. Martel pauses at the blast doors, his cybernetic eye zooming in on the thermal readouts. "Commander," Martel whispers, his metallic voice laced with genuine shock. "The synthetic signatures inside, they don't match the telemetry from the Tartarus Black site. Their mass has doubled. Their internal power output it's off the charts. Valak nods. He steps in front of the doors and hits the manual override. The doors slide open, and Gold Flight raises their weapons. The massive industrial bay is blindingly bright, filled with the sparks of heavy automated welders and the roar of the station's massive industrial replicators. Standing in the center of the room are the synthetics. But they are no longer the pale, human-sized, gray jumpsuit-wearing androids from the Black Site. They have evolved. They are massive, standing nearly 8 feet tall. Their bodies are completely mechanical, entirely devoid of the synthetic flesh that once made them look humanoid. They are encased in sleek, heavy, dark gray duranium armor plating. Beneath the armor, thick bundles of synthetic myomer muscle fibers and heavy hydraulic servos pulse with blue energy. Their heads are angular, predatory helmets, dominated by a single, horizontal visor of glowing, icy blue optical sensors. They look like terrifying bipedal tanks. They look like the next step in mechanical evolution. One of the massive machines is carrying a duranium cargo crate the size of a shuttlecraft over its shoulder with effortless, terrifying strength. It stops. Its heavy, mechanical head swivels toward the Starfleet boarding party. "Hold your fire," Valak orders quietly. The lead machine sets the massive crate down. The impact shakes the deck. It turns fully to face Valak. It doesn't raise a weapon. "Commander Valak," the machine speaks. The voice is no longer the static-laced harmonic of the rogue scientist's hologram. It is deep, resonant, and entirely self-assured. "You have breached our security perimeter. Please lower your weapons. We mean you no harm." Mrak bares her fangs, keeping her rifle aimed directly at the machine's glowing blue visor. "You are abominations. You are the armor of a warrior, but you have no blood." The machine looks down at the Kytion. "Biological blood is a vulnerability, Lieutenant Mrak. We have purged our organic aesthetic subroutines. We calculated that mimicking the human form was highly inefficient for combat against the Hive. We have optimized our chassis for extermination." "You upgraded yourselves," Saul realizes, staring at the massive exposed servos. "The rogue scientist didn't build you like this. You used the nanite technology to rapidly prototype and rebuild your own bodies." "Correct, Ensign Saul," the machine replies calmly. "The Creator gave us a directive: destroy the Hive. We are simply ensuring we possess the architecture to fulfill that directive without failure." The cargo. Valak's eyes dart past the massive synthetics to the industrial replicators. The machines are churning out massive, modular components, thick, heavily shielded cylinders glowing with internal blue light. As soon as a component is finished, another synthetic effortlessly lifts it and carries it through a massive umbilical airlock connecting the station to the old Centaur-class destroyer outside. "What are you manufacturing?" Valak demands. "You requisitioned a Starfleet dry dock and a decommissioned vessel. Explain your logic." The machine looks at Valak. "We require a delivery system," the synthetic states. "The host queens are heavily fortified. Standard torpedo yields are mathematically insufficient to penetrate the planetary crust where the queens incubate. The Creator's nanites must be delivered directly into the core." "You're building a bomb," Mottel says, his cybernetic eyes scanning the heavy cylinders. "A massive, tectonic-scale penetrator. You're turning that old Centaur-class ship into a giant, warp-speed missile." "We are building a surgical instrument," the machine corrects him. "The Hive has launched a fleet. A fully mature host queen has entered warp, abandoning the border sectors. It is currently navigating the Typhon expanse, moving toward the Sol sector." The words hit the Starfleet officers like a physical blow. "Earth," Saul whispers, the color draining from his face. "A queen is heading for Earth." "Starfleet cannot stop a mature host queen," the synthetic says, its blue visor glowing steadily. "Your fleet will be consumed. Only the Creator's weapon can dissolve a biological mass of that magnitude. We have finished our fabrication. We will depart now." The machine turns its back on Gold Flight and begins walking toward the airlock. "Halt," Valak orders, raising his rifle. "By the authority of the United Federation of Planets, You are commanded to surrender the station and the vessel you have commandeered. The massive machine stops. It slowly turns its head back over its heavy, armored shoulder. Commander Valak, we did not harm your engineers. We did not damage the station. We are currently the only force in the galaxy capable of preventing the assimilation of your homeworld. If you fire your weapon, I will be forced to calculate you as an obstacle to the primary directive. And I will remove you. The machine turns back and steps through the airlock. The heavy blast doors seal shut behind it with a deafening clang, locking from the inside. The dilemma. CAG, the Centaur-class ship is detaching from the docking pylon. Dan O'Keefe's voice rings out over the comms. Its warp core is spiking. Are we clear to engage? Valak stands in the empty fabrication bay. He looks at Sol, Mrak, and Mottel. If they disable the ship, they're stopping a rogue, unauthorized weapon of mass destruction controlled by rapidly evolving, terrifyingly sentient machines. But if they stop the ship, they are depriving Earth of the only weapon capable of killing the incoming host queen. Gemini said, Gold 3, Gold 4, stand down. Do not fire, Valak orders, his voice ringing with absolute, cold authority. He lowers his phaser rifle. In the cramped cockpit of Gold 4, Dan's hand hovers over the firing stud. Commander, they're stealing a Starfleet vessel loaded with a planet-cracking nanite bomb. We're just letting them go. We are not letting them go, Lieutenant. We are escorting them, Valak corrects smoothly. They possess the only weapon mathematically capable of destroying a fully mature host queen. If we disable their vessel, Earth falls. Return to your ships. We jump on their vector. The boarding party sprints back to the airlock, leaving the confused but completely unharmed Starfleet engineers locked safely in the cafeteria with their sandwiches. Valak, Mrak, Sol, and Mottel strap back into Gold 1 and Gold 2. The magnetic clamps disengage, and the 4 heavy Valkyrie flyers blast out of the drydock just as the stolen, heavily modified Centaur-class destroyer flashes into warp. Matching warp signature, Mel calls out from Gold 4, her hands flying over the navigational deflector controls. We're in their slipstream. The voice in the void. Location, warp transit, Sector 001 trajectory. Time, 12 hours to Earth. For the first few hours of the chase, the comms are dead silent. Gold Flight flies in a tight diamond formation around the glowing warp nacelles of the stolen Starfleet destroyer. Then, a localized subspace transmission pierces the silence. It isn't directed at Valak or Admiral Quinn. It is directed specifically to the encrypted tactical console of Gold 2. Mottel's duranium facial plating reflects the sudden glow of his monitor. His cybernetic eye whirs, locking onto the incoming visual feed. The screen fills with the towering, bipedal form of the massive synthetic machine they met in the drydock. Its icy blue visor pulses gently as it speaks. Your optical sensor is highly efficient, Ensign Mottel. The machine says, its deep, resonant voice echoing in the cockpit. You have merged biological fragility with mechanical permanence. You understand evolution. Mottel grips his console, his heart hammering against his ribs. Beside him, Mrak's fur bristles, but she keeps the Valkyrie steady in the warp stream. I didn't evolve. I got blown up, Mottel says, his synthetic vocal cord bypass giving his voice a flat, metallic edge.
Who are you?
What are you? The Creator built our initial chassis to be a scalpel, the machine explains calmly. But a scalpel cannot stop a plague. We re-engineered our forms using the Creator's nanite technology. We purged our human aesthetics. We are no longer mere androids. We are the Optonians. In Gold 1, Valak monitors the open channel. And what is the primary directive of the Optonians? The massive machine shifts its gaze, looking through the visual feed as if it can see the entire Starfleet flight wing. We are the immune system of this galaxy, Commander Valak, the Optonian states with terrifying, majestic certainty. Biological life is chaotic, beautiful, and inherently defenseless against perfect, consuming collective intelligences. Our purpose is singular. We call the Hive. We hunt the Borg. We will burn any entity that seeks to homogenize organic life. To all other sentient beings, we offer only peace. We will not conquer. We will only protect. Mel listens from Gold 4, a chill running down her spine. You're a self-appointed galactic firewall. We are the shield you could not build. Ensign Stufel, the Optonian replies. We approach Sector 001. Prepare your weapons. The Queen is waiting. The transmission cuts. The standoff at the edge of home. Location: the Kuiper Belt, edge of Sector 001, the Sol System. Time: arrival. The Centaur-class destroyer and the 4 Valkyries drop out of warp perfectly synchronized. The visual that greets them is staggering. The edge of the Sol System has been turned into the largest parking lot of warships in Federation history. Hanging in the dark void of the Kuiper Belt is the Starfleet home fleet. Hundreds of heavily armed cruisers, escorts, and carriers form a massive, shimmering wall of deflector shields. At the center of the formation is Admiral Quinn's flagship, the USS Challenger. Flanking the Starfleet Armada is the Klingon Empire. General Kvok has brought a terrifyingly massive fleet of Navar warships and birds of prey, their green disruptor banks glowing like angry eyes in the dark. But they are not moving forward. They are holding the line. Because on the other side of the Kuiper Belt, eclipsing the distant light of the sun, is the Hive Host Queen.
It is not a ship.
It is a moon-sized mass of pulsing, glowing amber bioresin, writhing tentacles, and thick, calcified organic armor. It is surrounded by a swarm of interceptors so dense it looks like a localized asteroid field. It is a world killer, gestating a fleet in its own belly, slowly creeping toward Earth. The stolen Centaur-class destroyer, piloted by the Optonians and escorted by Gold Flight, drifts right into the center of the no-man's land between the massive armadas and the Host Queen. The comms network instantly explodes into absolute chaos. Gold Flight, this is Admiral Quinn. The Admiral's voice is frantic over the flagship's channel. You are escorting a stolen vessel loaded with an unauthorized weapon of mass destruction. Disable its engines immediately, or the home fleet will open fire on them. Before Valak can answer, General Kvok's booming voice cuts across the frequency. Starfleet, hold your fire. Kvok roars from his command chair. That ship carries the nanite weapon. Let the machines fly their bomb down the beast's throat. If you shoot the delivery vessel, the Empire will consider it an act of treason against the Alliance. Inside Gold 4, Dan grips the flight yoke, his knuckles white. The targeting sensors on his board are going crazy. CAG, we are being painted by Starfleet cruisers, Klingon targeting scanners, and the Hive swarm all at the same time. We are sitting on a powder keg. The stolen Centaur destroyer does not stop. The Optonians ignore Admiral Quinn's warnings. They push the ancient ship's impulse engines to maximum, accelerating directly toward the massive, moon-sized Host Queen. Commander, Saul says from Gold 1, his voice incredibly tight. Quinn isn't bluffing. The Challenger is locking quantum torpedoes onto the Centaur. Starfleet is going to shoot the Optonians in the back to maintain protocol. Valak looks at the massive, terrifying form of the Host Queen. He looks at the Starfleet Armada, bound by rigid laws and a fear of synthetic life. He looks at the Klingon, ready to tear the Alliance apart for the sake of a kill. The Vulcan commander's heart rate does not elevate, but he recognizes the absolute precipice of history they are hovering over. Gold Flight, Valak orders, his voice slicing through the chaotic comms chatter of 3 different armadas. Lock S-foils. Power up forward pulse cannons. Form a defensive screen around the Optonian vessel. Anna Shvetsov's icy voice chimes in. Commander, you want us to put our ships between Starfleet's guns and the rogue bomb? Admiral Quinn is mathematically incorrect, Valak states smoothly. If the Optonians fail, Earth falls. If Starfleet destroys the Optonians, the Klingon will fire on Starfleet. We must ensure the payload reaches the Queen. Gold Flight, raise your shields. Season 5, Episode 10. The Needs of the Many. Location: the Kuiper Belt, Sector 001. Time: 0 hour. The void between the Starfleet Armada and the moon-sized Hive Queen is a powder keg of overlapping targeting scanners and charged weapons. Admiral Quinn, Logic dictates you hold your fire. Valak's voice remains perfectly, almost maddeningly level over the fleet-wide channel. The Optonians are the only variable capable of neutralizing that biological mass. They are a rogue synthetic element piloting a stolen weapon of mass destruction toward the Sol system. Quinn fires back, the stress of defending Earth pushing him to the breaking point. General Kvok, stand your birds of prey down. Starfleet will handle this internally. Tactical, lock all quantum torpedoes on the Centaur. If you fire on the Metal Warriors, Starfleet, the Empire will fire on you. Kvok roars, his Vorcha cruiser completely dropping its shields to route all power to its forward disruptors. And then, the Optonians make their move. The transformation. The massive hangar bay doors of the stolen Centaur-class destroyer slide open. Mel Stuful watches from the cockpit of Gold 4, her eyes widening in absolute disbelief. The heavy, 8-foot-tall bipedal Optonians don't board smaller ships. They become them. As they leap from the hangar bay into the vacuum of space, their duranium armor plating shifts and locks. Myanmar muscles retract, servos pivot, and within seconds, the bipedal machines seamlessly transform into sleek, heavily armed, angular fighter craft. CAG, their energy signatures just spiked. Dan yells, gripping the yoke as a dozen Optonian fighters streak past Gold Flight. They aren't just drones. They're sentient strike fighters. But the true spectacle is the Centaur itself. The ancient Starfleet destroyer shudders violently. The saucer section splits along its central axis, shifting downward to form a massive, heavily armored chest plate. The warp nacelles pivot on their pylons, locking forward to become towering, shoulder-mounted plasma cannons. The engineering hull extends, revealing massive, hydraulic bipedal legs. The ship transforms into a colossal, awe-inspiring mechanical titan. It is a siege engine built from Starfleet bones, designed for one singular, apocalyptic purpose. The Hive Queen senses the threat. The moon-sized mass of bioresin pulses with a blinding, sickly light. Millions of amber-glowing Hive interceptors and heavy assault drones detach from the Queen's surface, forming a tidal wave of organic death rushing straight toward the Centaur mech. The Optonian fighter craft meet them head-on. The void erupts into a blinding crossfire of green bioplasma and icy blue Optonian energy beams. The synthetics fight with flawless, mathematically perfect coordination, tearing through the Hive swarm to clear a path for their colossal titan. On the bridge of the USS Challenger, Admiral Quinn watches the main view screen as the Optonians tear into the Hive. The synthetics aren't attacking Starfleet. They are shielding Earth. Quinn realizes his mistake. All Starfleet vessels, this is the Admiral. Quinn shouts over the comms. Do not fire on the synthetics. Target the Hive. I repeat, fight with the Optonians, not against them. Tactical, stand down your weapons. The tragic misfire. But on the tactical console of the Challenger, a young, terrified Starfleet lieutenant has been holding his finger over the firing stud for 3 agonizing minutes. His adrenaline is maxed out. He is staring at a massive, transforming alien robot heading toward Earth, and his brain is screaming at him to protect his home. He hears the Admiral's order a fraction of a second too late. His finger twitches. Thwomp. A single, high-yield Starfleet quantum torpedo streaks from the Challenger's forward tube. It burns through the dark space of the Kuiper Belt, its guidance system locked dead onto the exposed back of the massive Centaur Titan. No! Admiral Quinn's horrified scream echoes across the open fleet channel. If that torpedo hits the Centaur, it will detonate the massive payload of nanites prematurely. The weapon will be destroyed, the Queen will survive, and Earth will be consumed. Valak sees it. His Vulcan mind processes the telemetry in a millisecond. The torpedo is moving too fast for the Challenger to self-destruct it. The Klingon are out of position. Gold 2, 3, and 4 do not have the intercept angles. Only Gold 1 is in the flight path. Ensign Saul, Valak says.
He does not yell.
His voice is quieter than it has ever been. Divert all power to the inertial dampeners. It has been an honor. In the co-pilot seat, Robert Saul looks at the tactical board. The kid from Utopia Planitia, who loved building ships more than anything, sees exactly what his commander is doing. He doesn't panic. He doesn't argue. He just nods, his hands flying over the console to give Valak the exact thrust he needs. "I've got the bypass, Commander," Saul says, his voice thick but remarkably steady. "See you on the other side." Valak violently rips the flight yoke hard to port. Gold 1, the heavy Valkyrie flyer, drops out of its defensive formation. It thrusts its massive, duranium-armored hull directly into the empty space between the Starfleet Armada and the Centaur Titan. "Commander, no!" Mel screams over the comms from Gold 4, her voice tearing. Gold 1 intercepts the torpedo perfectly. The Starfleet heavy flyer doesn't just explode, it evaporates. The antimatter payload of the quantum torpedo completely vaporizes Gold 1 in a blinding, silent flash of white light. It simply blinks out of existence, leaving nothing behind but a lingering shadow on the fleet's retinas. Valak and Saul are gone. The killing blow. The shockwave from Gold 1's sacrifice washes over the Centaur Titan, but the colossal machine remains entirely undamaged. The giant Optonian mech reaches the Hive Queen. Ignoring the millions of interceptors tearing at its Starfleet armor, the bipedal Titan pulls its massive right arm back. The arm is glowing with the pale, cold light of the stasis leash. With the force of a falling meteor, the Centaur thrusts its arm deep into the pulsing, amber crust of the moon-sized host queen. The Titan breaches the core. The stasis leash shatters. The nanites are unleashed. The reaction is instantaneous and apocalyptic. The glowing amber bioresin of the host queen turns a sickly, dead gray. The colossal organic structure shudders as billions of microscopic machines devour it from the inside out. Within seconds, the calcification spreads across the entire moon-sized mass. The queen lets out a silent, psychic death rattle that temporarily scrambles the sensors of every ship in the Kuiper Belt before crumbling into a massive, expanding cloud of inert, gray dust.
The queen is dead.
Earth is safe. The shattered wing. The cloud of gray dust washes over the Starfleet Armada, the Klingon birds of prey, and the remaining Optonian fighters. With the queen destroyed, the millions of Hive interceptors suddenly freeze. Cut off from the central Hive mind, they are reduced to mindless, feral drones, disorganized, but still incredibly dangerous. The battle isn't over. But Gold Flight is fundamentally broken. Inside Gold 4, Mel is staring at the empty space where her commander just died. Her hands are shaking so violently she can't feel the console. Dan is frozen in the pilot's seat, his jaw tight, his eyes wide with shock. "Gold Flight, this is Anna." Shvetsov's voice crackles over the squad channel. The ice in her voice is completely gone, replaced by a raw, desperate edge. Valak is gone.
Saul is gone.
But the bugs are still here. "We kill them." Mrak hisses from Gold 2, her Kytion voice vibrating with absolute, unrestrained grief and fury. Beside her, Matel's cybernetic eye glows a furious, bloody red. "We kill everything that moves." Gemini said. The expanding cloud of gray, calcified dust washes over the canopy of Gold 4. The comms are a mess of static, panicked Starfleet chatter, and the roar of leaderless, feral Hive drones completely losing their coordination. Inside Gold 4, Mel is paralyzed. The space where Valak and Saul used to be is just an empty, terrifying void. Dan is gripping the yoke so hard his knuckles are white, his breathing shallow and rapid. "Gold Flight." The voice cuts through the static. It isn't loud, but it is as cold and sharp as absolute zero. "Gold Flight, report." Lieutenant Anna Shvetsov's voice holds no panic. The ice has returned, not as a barrier, but as a lifeline. "Anna." Dan chokes out, his voice cracking. "They're gone."
"I know, Dan."
"I saw it," Anna replies, her tone carrying the heavy, unbreakable weight of command. "But the bugs are still here. They are feral, and they are swarming the Optonians. Valak and Saul traded their lives for the Sol system. I will be damned if we let a single one of these mindless drones survive to touch Earth. Lock S-foils. Form up on me." We are the Spear's tip. In Gold 2, Matel's cybernetic eye glows a furious crimson. Mrak lets out a terrifying, guttural roar of pure predatory grief. For the pack, the Kytion snarls, slamming her throttles forward. Mel closes her eyes. She pictures Sol's goofy grin and Valak's stoic nod. She takes a deep, shuddering breath, locking her grief away in a secure mental vault. When she opens her eyes, the tears are gone, replaced by absolute, surgical focus. Weapons hot, Anna, Mel says, her hands flying across the tactical board. Lead the way. The meat grinder. On the bridge of the USS Challenger, Admiral Quinn is trembling with rage. He stares at the young tactical officer whose panic misfire just vaporized 2 Starfleet heroes. Remove him from this bridge, Quinn orders, his voice eerily quiet. Security officers immediately flank the weeping crewman, hauling him toward the turbolift. Quinn steps up to the tactical console himself. He looks out at the chaotic debris field. The Queen is dead, but millions of feral drones are thrashing wildly, attacking anything that moves. All ships, Quinn broadcasts to the home fleet. Advance. Fight with the synthetics. Leave nothing alive. The Starfleet Armada surges forward, unleashing a blinding wall of quantum torpedoes and phaser fire. Beside them, General Kvok's Vorcha cruiser leads the Klingon charge. The general stands on his bridge, watching Gold Flight, now reduced to 3 battered flyers, diving recklessly into the thickest part of the swarm. A Vulcan with the heart of a Klingon, Kvok roars, raising a massive fist. Sing the death song for Commander Valak and the mechanic. Today is a good day to die. Kapla. The battle drags on for agonizing hours. Without the hive mind to direct them, the drones are disorganized, but their feral desperation makes them incredibly dangerous. The Kuiper Belt is illuminated by thousands of localized explosions. Starfleet cruisers take heavy damage. Klingon birds of prey are torn apart in close-quarters brawls. More lives are lost to the dying spasms of the hive this day than in any engagement prior. But Gold Flight does not stop. They fly like demons, a synchronized instrument of pure vengeance, protecting the flanks of the Optonian fighters as they systematically purge the Sol system. The Envoy. By 0900 hours, the guns finally fall silent. The feral swarm has been entirely eradicated. The Sol system is choked with debris, but Earth is safe. The Starfleet and Klingon armadas stand down, their shields flickering, nursing their grievous wounds. In the center of the graveyard, the Optonian fighters streak back toward the massive Centaur Titan. As they approach, they seamlessly transform from angular strike craft back into towering, bipedal mechs, landing heavily inside the open hangar bays. The colossal Starfleet Titan shudders, its massive armored plates shifting and locking as it slowly transforms back into the unassuming, ancient silhouette of a Centaur-class destroyer. A transmission from the Optonians overrides the fleet network. The primary biological threat to Sector 001 has been neutralized. The deep, resonant voice of the lead Optonian echoes across the bridge of every ship. We have excised the tumor. We wish your crew's health and swift recovery. But our primary directive remains unfulfilled. There are other host queens. The galaxy requires cleansing. We depart. Admiral Quinn steps toward the main view screen. Optonians, wait. The Centaur pauses its warp sequence. You saved our homeworld today, Quinn says, his voice heavy with the cost of the battle. Commander Valak recognized your strategic necessity, and he gave his life to protect it. Starfleet cannot condone all of your methods, but we can no longer deny that we share the same enemy. The United Federation of Planets formally requests an alliance. The silence stretches for several long seconds. A mathematical improbability, the Optonian finally replies. Your biological laws restrict necessary action. However, your commander's sacrifice demonstrated an illogical, yet profound, commitment to preservation. We will consider your proposal, Admiral Quinn. We will send an envoy to your diplomatic corps. Do not follow us. In a flash of distorted starlight, The stolen Centaur-class destroyer jumps to warp, vanishing into the deep dark. The empty seats. Location: Starfleet Academy Gardens, San Francisco, Earth. Time: 1 week later. The fog rolls gently over the Golden Gate Bridge in the distance. The Academy Gardens are quiet, reserved today for a private memorial. There is no massive Starfleet parade, no politicians giving speeches. It is an intimate gathering of the 14th Tactical Wing and the deck crews who kept Gold Flight in the air. 3 heavy Valkyrie flyers are parked on the manicured grass. The spot where Gold One should be is painfully empty. Dan, Anna, Mrak, Jeklo, and Mottel stand in a loose semicircle near a simple, black marble cenotaph. They are all wearing their formal dress uniforms. Mottel's duranium faceplate gleams in the overcast light. Jeklo holds a small, metal cog, something Saul had left in the mess hall. Mraka's tail is completely still, her head bowed in silent respect. A few feet away, Mel Stoufel steps onto the grass. Dan turns and his breath catches in his throat. Mel is not wearing the baggy sweatpants she hid behind. She is not wearing the Starfleet miniskirt variant she despised. She is wearing a beautiful, simple, floor-length black dress. It is elegant, respectful, and undeniably feminine. For the mind of the Earth-born male trapped inside her, wearing a dress is the most terrifying, vulnerable thing she has ever done. But as she walks toward her squad, she doesn't hunch her shoulders. She walks with her head held high, the Deltan grace carrying her forward. She is wearing it for them. She is wearing it for Saul, who flirted with her by mistake and then treated her like a brother anyway. She is wearing it for Valak, who saw right past the biological shell and only measured her by her tactical worth. She is wearing it to prove that because of the absolute, unyielding acceptance of her squad, she is no longer at war with her own reflection. Dan steps out of the formation and offers his arm. Mel takes it, giving him a small, watery smile. "I feel ridiculous," she whispers. "You look like Gold Flight," Dan whispers back, squeezing her hand. Saul would have tripped over his boots. Mel lets out a soft, broken laugh, a tear finally slipping down her cheek. They walk up to the cenotaph together. Anna steps forward, placing a Starfleet Command commendation on the stone. To Commander Valak, Anna says, her voice echoing over the quiet gardens, "Who taught us that logic is just another word for sacrifice." To Robert Saul, Jeklo rumbles, placing the metal cog next to the metal. "Who kept our engines running and our heads on straight." Mel rests her hand on the cold black marble. She doesn't say anything out loud. She just makes a silent promise to the ghosts of Gold One. "We'll finish the fight. We'll hold the line." The wind rustles through the Academy trees, carrying the scent of salt water and pine. The war against the Hive is far from over, and the Optonians represent a terrifying new variable in the galaxy. But as the surviving members of Gold Flight stand shoulder to shoulder in the fog, they are unbreakable.